just the intro.
Okay.
I think also everyone should close their microphones when Roz is talking, so there's not an echo.
Okay. So Roz asked me to introduce them both. And you know what? After 26 years in the birthing world, I just met them now. So it's like, whoa. I mean, I've heard of Roz. I've seen her posts. Jody, I barely heard of a little bit here and there the past couple months. How wonderful it is to have her in SidebySide. What a blessing. She should never leave, except to do home birth. Except to do home birth. It's okay. So as some of you know, I've been training doulas for 18 years. I've been a doula myself for 26 years under Donna. And I've written a few books. I wanted to mention the CDs though, that I made with, unfortunately, we lost somebody very, very close to the birth world and women's health and women's healing, named Rebbetzin Yatim Neustadt. She was nifter this summer. So I was okay to gather a group of women and originally on tape, then we went to CDs. Now we're on emails, yeah, I guess MP3s, whatever it is, but it's growth through childbirth. I wanted a lot of the religious women to have this bitachon atzmi and understanding what birth is. And so she spoke because she gave a lot of shirim on Amuna and Bitachon and the woman's role, and she had seminars, an amazing woman. So we made this, and anyone who, just let me know, you can order it online. It's about 10 shekels, goes to my doula fund. And then I wanted something for the pregnancy. So this is called Balancing Hishtadlus and Bitachon during pregnancy. Because some people just, I'm going to be healthy, and everything's going to go all right. And some people just say, I'm just going to have total faith in whatever Hashem does, and I'll just eat what I want and not exercise and whatever's meant to be. But there has to be a balance, as we all know. So I just gave her the title and she took it away. So they're each an hour long and they're really mitchazek. I also made... that's why I say it's just so hard to believe. When you think you know everybody in the birthing world, then you meet Roz and you meet Jody, who I'm going to introduce them now. But I also have birthing libraries everywhere from Har Nov to Geula to Beitar to Neve Yaakov to where I originally lived. Now I'm in Ramat Beit Shemesh. One of my students has a library out here because I just felt that women may not buy books, or they may buy just one book, and there's such a variety of ways to look at birth. So there's 12 libraries all over, not yet in the north or the south, but we're getting there. So Roz was originally a doula, and she still is a doula. And she told me a little bit about herself, that she trained in helping women who've gone through trauma or just anxious. Some women are just terrified of birth, and she's going to tell you more of how she helps them get through it and also give us tips. And Jody was a doula for 7 years and became a midwife, and she's been a midwife in SidebySide for 9 years, all the while raising 4 boys, and must be a very supportive husband over there. So to be able to do this, and her specialty is VBAC support and planned cesarean. A lot of women, there are a percentage of women who know during the pregnancy that they're going to need a cesarean. Either they have placenta previa, different situations, triplets, whatever, and they have to know how to go through it. And Jody's specialty is helping them do that. I actually helped edit, I'm going to get it to Efrat. I figured out, I think, how. Cesarean information guide that a friend of mine, she actually is the daughter of a midwife in America, but for some physiological reason, she can only have cesareans. So that's what she has. And she made this guide It's pretty long, pretty extensive, of everything from immediately after the cesarean, because till well into postpartum and nursing. She basically was not given enough information after her cesarean, so she went through a really hard postpartum period. They have you get up, they have you the basics. So she decided to create that pamphlet in English, and now it's in Hebrew as well. So I'll have to get those to Jody. Or if you know someone coming to RBS, let me know. Okay. I don't know, you're muted.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. No, Sarah, I was going to tell you, I'll be in touch with you. I'm actually going to be in Ramat Beit Shemesh tomorrow.
My gosh, you get to meet you in the flesh live.
Exactly. So I will call you tomorrow.
Okay. These are my buttons I got actually at a midwifery conference, and I just wear them for fun. I don't wear them to births anymore. Just like too embarrassing. But meconium happens is one, and doulas and midwives, what a team is one, and empowering women everywhere. So I didn't want to go in too flashy. So I wear it once in a while to birth in the hospitals, but not too much. Anyway, so Roz, do you want to start?
I sure do. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank Rena Perlmutter because she is the brains behind this whole idea. Rena contacted Sarah because Rena, I'm not sure where you are, but a big shout out to you. Unfortunately, she has a woman in her neighborhood whose husband was killed in Gaza, I believe, and she is ready to give birth. And Rena wanted to get more information and thought about all the doulas out there who are going to be facing many challenging situations. She approached Sarah, and Sarah, thank you, so graciously said, let's do this. And here we are today doing it and recording it for the future. So I wanted to definitely a shout out and a thank you. And I just wanted to also show you these are the books that Sarah has written. And I encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to see them, to look at them, to read them. It's really, it's a beautiful stories about birth and just giving us chizuk to keep going and doing what we're doing. So thank you, Sarah, for all your support. And now we will begin. So first, I want to tell you very quickly about Jody and myself, because I think that we are can augment some of what you folks are doing. Jody and I came together almost 2 years ago and put JR side by side. And you see here is all our contact information. I encourage you, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, to look us up, because we have a lot of videos that we talk about what we do and how we approach. I am a birth doula who's trained in trauma and grief. I work with women who've had miscarriages, stillbirths, early infant loss, women who are trying to get pregnant, and each and every period for them is a loss. So that has been mostly my focus. I attend births for women post-trauma. The woman had sometimes the stories that we hear about what happens to them in the hospital, and then they go ahead and have another baby, and they definitely need extra support while giving birth. Jody is a resident midwife who also gives the individualized courses for, as Sarah was saying, for VBAC, for planned C-section, as well as being available to help a woman to be a, what's it called? Help me.
Do you want me to?
No, just tell me, what is it? She does midwifery consultation for women who are having complicated pregnancies or who don't understand the system, for new Olim. So there's a myriad of services that we offer, and we encourage you to, if you need support or if questions, I've had already a few doulas calling me, asking me questions, any ideas of how to, and I'm more than happy to be there. So we take referrals, we take questions gladly. We are all in the same business where we're trying to support women and give them the best experience possible. So today we're going to talk about grief. The first half of this presentation is really going to be focused on grief. I know that you all are professionals and you know your work. what all of it, lactation, physiotherapy, doulaing. So that I know you have, but what I want to do is give you an understanding of the grief process and what tools that you can use while helping a woman who may or may not be, who is in grief. An idea is obviously the more you know, the better that you can serve the women. So thank you for showing up. Okay, thank you for coming to this class. But I want you to look at the words that I have on the screen. Those words are showing up. Those are the most powerful words to use for grief. A person in grief needs friends, family to be there, to show up, because they are feeling isolated. Grief is a very isolating experience, and showing up is only the best way to help them. So the question is, I showed up. I went to Shiva. So what's the big deal? What else? But that's the point, is after Shiva, that's when the showing up occurs. Showing up can look differently for each person, for each relationship, but it means making a meal. It means coming to a friend's house. Do you want to go for a walk? And if she bites your head off, you come back again tomorrow and say, what can I do? You are not showing up because she's saying, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. You are showing up even when she's not receptive, because she doesn't know what she needs. She doesn't know what she wants. So clearly you don't know what to do for her, but for her knowing that you are going to be there, that you are a constant in her life or his life, that is the best that you can do for a person who is steeped in grief. So the two most important words are showing up. And when you're with a woman who's giving birth in a hospital, reassuring her, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm by your side. Those are powerful words. Those are reassuring words. Don't be scared to use them. Okay, so we've showed up. Now what? First, I want to take a moment and I want to differentiate between mourning and grief, because a lot of us say, I know how to do grief. We do Shiva. And our religion is fantastic in that we have very great rituals. We have Shiva, we have Kvura, we have Shiva, we have Shloshim. So we have, within our work, we have responses, we have rituals. But wait a minute, we don't always. A woman who's had a miscarriage, who's had a stillbirth, who's had an early infant loss, has no rituals. What do rituals do for us? They give us validation. You are going through a very difficult time. You've lost somebody you love. You have the death of somebody you love. And we as a community are here to support you. We're coming to the Shiva. We're coming to the Kvura. We're coming to the Shloshim. We're showing up because our rituals are giving us guidance. A woman who's gone through those kinds of losses, miscarriage, stillbirth, early infant loss, there's no Shiva. There's no Kvura. And there is Kvura, but there's no ceremony. There's no Shloshim. There are no rituals. So what are we then doing? We're not validating. And validation is key. Just like showing up is validating that you are going through a hard time, rituals are validating that you are going through a hard time. Yet, for some of our losses, there are no rituals. Now let's look at this slide, because this is really an important slide. Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change of a familiar pattern of behavior. What does this mean? It means that grief is not only death. Very important and very complicated concept. Death is, death is easy. We understand it. You lose a grandparent, you lose a parent. We understand death is death. But we're saying grief goes way beyond death. A person loves their job, has been doing it for 25 years, goes to work one day and finds out the company's been sold. 3 weeks later, finds out the company is downsizing and he's losing his job. He's in grief. Nobody died, but yet what he loved, what identified him in his mind as a professional, is now being taken away from him. He's in grief. That is called grief. A person goes through a divorce, even if they wanted the divorce, even if the marriage was toxic, there is grief involved because there is a change in behavior. There's a change in expectation. There's a change in the dream. When they got married, the couple thought that this was going to be forever and it was going to be idyllic. And by the time they wind up having this divorce, there's grief. When they walk their child down to the chuppah and they're no longer a couple, there's grief. So it's important to understand that grief is not just death. Now, why is that important now to us? Because unfortunately, with what's going on, we have so much death, we have so much injuries that we have enough grief. But it's important to understand that as doulas, you are going to come across many, many different women coming from different parts of different walks of life and from different parts of the country. We have so many women and families that are displaced and no longer with where they're used to being. So you could very easily have a woman who comes to you and says, listen, I need a doula. This is my 6th child. I was living in the South on October 7th. We had to leave immediately. We left everything and now we're living in a hotel. And I don't know if my husband's going to come to the birth or not. So I want to take the doula. I'm not sure who's going to be there. My husband's in and out of Miluim. So no problem. And she's like really put together. She tells you about her previous births. She tells you about, what's going on with her children. She tells you with her husband's in and out of Miluim, but it's okay. I got it under control. It's no problem. And, you're like, okay, this is okay. This woman's got it together. And you walk into the hospital with her, she's having contractions and she looks around and she's like a different person all of a sudden. She can't function. She can't move. And you're like, whoa, what happened? Well, let's put the puzzle together and let's start dissecting what happened here. Here's a woman who was living in the South on October 7th. She was living on Kibbutz Sa'ad. Kibbutz Sa'ad was attacked, but thank God it wasn't terrible. There's terrible trauma there. They're displaced. She's living in a hotel. She left with the clothes on her back. Her children left with the clothes on their back. Her parents left with the clothes on, and they're all living at the hotel together. And she's so busy taking care of everybody that she didn't have time to take care of herself. She didn't have time to deal with her own emotions about it. And what she did was she denied it all. And here, when her contractions start and she walks into this strange hospital, this is her 6th birth. Her other births were all in the hospital in the South. She knew it. She was comfortable. It hit her. Everything just came at her in one swift swoop. The grief came pouring out. She didn't want it to because on a frontal level, she still wasn't dealing with it. But you know something? There's a saying, the body knows. And the body and the mind work together. And once those contractions started, her defense mechanisms within her body started to erode. And she was hit with the reality of what she was doing, that she was giving birth in a strange hospital without her husband, while living in a hotel and living in a state of uncertainty. So just because a woman does not have a spouse who, God forbid, was killed or a brother who was killed, it doesn't mean she's not in grief. And just because she doesn't portray that while at a pre-birth meeting, or even it can hit her halfway through labor, And it might not be dramatic. It might be very well. Jody told me a story. She had a woman who was doing great. She was progressing. She was 7 centimeters along, and all of a sudden, everything stopped. Nothing, no contractions, nothing. So, they try, interventions. First, they tried natural interventions to try and get it going because it almost didn't make sense. Why at this point would her labor stop? And then they tried interventions and still nothing. And finally, Jody sat down with her and took her hand and started talking to her. And it came out that she had had trauma in her past birth and she never dealt with it. And by talking to Jody and by Jody's encouragement, she was able to verbalize where her block was. And once she was able to verbalize the block, Jody was able to help get those contractions starting again. So that's the power of our body-mind connection. Her body was protecting her because her mind couldn't handle going through another birth. And it was only with support and only with the understanding of taking the time. I'm showing up. I'm here for you. We're in this together. We can do this. Was Jody able to get her to release some of that angst and let her body go back to doing the work it needed to do? We all have a story. It's very important to understand that. Our life is our story. What happens to us in our life, the good, the bad, the ugly, that's our story. And we have to understand that. And we can't get rid of that story as much as we may want to. The woman in my example, the one from the South, she was in denial. She was busy in the hotel taking care of her children, taking care of her parents, doing everything that she possibly could, that she needed to do, except for one thing. She wasn't taking care of herself. She wasn't dealing with her own angst, her own emotion, her own reality. And what happens is when we do that, it can't last forever. It always comes back to us because our body knows. We have women now that we're seeing now that it's becoming much more acceptable and much more grief itself is starting to become more acceptable in a school. People are talking about it more. And we're seeing women in their 50s and 60s who had stillbirths when they were younger, miscarriages. And what they did with that was they just put it away. They never processed, they never dealt with it. They never allowed the emotions to come out because they were told, oh, don't worry, it's okay, you'll be fine. And what happens when you do that is you feel like you're not being validated. And when you're not being validated, you put it away. But it comes back. It comes back stronger and it needs to be processed. So acknowledging that we have a story, acknowledging that what happens to us needs to have space is where we're able to move forward. And with this woman, had she spoken to the social workers, had she allowed herself to say, oh my God, that was absolutely traumatic, horrible, to work it through, she might not have had that same response. It takes a long time to work it through. I'm not saying she would have been in great shape, but she would have been in better shape. So that's really important. I do want to say one thing at this point is that what the country did when it came to the Mifunaim, and by putting them in those hotels by Yishuvim and Kibbutzim, allowed these people some support. They had each other. They weren't isolated from each other. And most everybody went together to these hotels and stayed together for a very long time. They got support from being together. It's that isolation, it's that going through a traumatic event by yourself that makes it much harder. The fact that they were together was a real nice crutch, and it was kol hakavod that it was acknowledged and they were able to do that. We can't control what happens in our story, but we can control how we react to it. Okay? So that's a really important piece to remember. And that's what we're talking about. having obviously going through the trauma of October 7th, or going through personal trauma, a divorce, losing a spouse, losing a child. We can't control that. That's not what we could do, but we do have control and how we deal with it. And that's the most important piece here. And the answer basically is time and support. But what does that mean? When you go through a grief process, when grief hits you, be it a death, be it the loss of a pet, we don't judge. Very important to remember, we don't judge anybody else's grief. Everybody feels their grief in their own way. Everybody, and where your grief comes from is not just the present. It has a lot to do with your past as well. It's important to remember our story affects our grief. Our story affects all our responses, not just our grief. So every person's grief is different because every person has a different story. So to compare, and I just had someone crying to me that, she is going through her own grief, and then her friend is like basically telling her, oh, honey, I have it much worse than you. This is what happened to me. And again, what is that friend, and I'll put friend in quotes, what is that friend doing? It's invalidating her grief. It's telling her yours isn't as important as mine. And we never want to make that statement to anybody. Anybody who's in pain, anybody who is going through a loss, whether it be a death, whether it be the loss of a job, whether it be the loss of a pet, it's their emotion, it's their pain, and we have to acknowledge it, not judge it. And we never, ever say it's going to get better. Because while you're in that moment, that is not validating. You need to respond to the moment. I'm so sorry. What can I do? I'm going to give you a hug. Is that okay? I'm right here by your side. Those are supportive statements that do not judge and do not tell her it's going to get better. Because at the moment, she can't see it. She can't hear it. It will get better. You know it and I know it, but she can't know it yet. When she's ready to hear it, you'll see it. The first month to 2 months of most loss, there's numbness. There's absolute numbness. Think about it. Let's go back to October 7th. Think about how you felt when you were listening after Chag, when you were listening to the initial reports. And then on October 8th, when the numbers started getting horrific and the stories started coming out. I can only talk about myself, but I was like, I couldn't believe it. I almost needed to keep reading and hearing it so that I could kind of like get it into my soul. I couldn't understand it. It was like, and that's a numbness. And I wasn't there. I wasn't affected in the way that other people were affected, but we were all affected. And our initial reaction, besides horror, there's an element of numbness. So think about if you were there, God forbid, or think about when you, God forbid, lose somebody or something that you really love, that initial reaction, and it's again, your body trying to protect you initially, is that numbness that, no, this really didn't happen. Like, no, I know it sounds like denial and it is a bit of denial, but there's almost the largest piece is numbness. Because part of the goal, and this is something that you're not going to get to, because you're seeing the woman for a very short time, and you're not going to be able to get to and this is where the support, the grief support, the counseling comes in, is you have to feel the grief. The person that's going through it eventually has to feel the grief. There's a saying that you can't heal what you don't feel. So we work at getting the emotions out. That's not going to be something that you could do But it's something that Jody was able to do because it wasn't a fresh loss for this woman. It wasn't a fresh trauma. And just by talking about, just by acknowledging that there was trauma and getting the validation that that was, a very difficult time, and listening and being there for her, her body was able to relax enough to allow that to happen. So a lot of this is instinctual. A lot of this is understanding. And a lot of it is validation and showing up. Those are the keys to helping people through, especially when it's an old wound, an old loss, especially when it's ingrained and it's not as fresh. Okay. So time is the first piece, and the second piece is support. So how do we support? And again, the way to support is validation and showing up, and slowly with support, and hopefully they find somebody to really work it through, you start to see a shift in their pain, in their grief, in their behavior. For a person who was incapable of getting out of bed and taking a shower and eating a meal was a huge successful day for them, slowly during the days, the coming days, they start to take a walk around the block. They make a phone call to a friend. They start coming back into the world. They start coming back into a shigra. It's not an old shigra because nothing stays the same, but they start functioning again. Now, the shift also is like everything else, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You'll see that they'll start to function, and then they won't get out of bed one day. That's okay, as long as the next day they do get out of bed. And as a professional, what I remind them is, but you can get out of bed because look what you did the other day. You walked around the block. You validate the behaviors that help them continue to move forward. Okay, you had a bad day, you stayed in bed. It's okay, it's not a problem. Tomorrow you're taking a walk. And that helps them to keep moving forward, and that keeps that trajectory going. And that's what's really crucial. But you have to understand those are 2 big words, time and support, that you don't have as a birth doula. And that's where it's hard, because we always want to help and we always want to make people better. And you don't have that time and that element of watching that shift happen. So just have to be realistic about what your expectations of what you can achieve as that birth doula. Always keep your mind, your head in the goal, and your primary goal is the birth, is a healthy birth of the baby and mommy. Okay, triggers. That is a word. I just want to tell you a little about this word. I'm sure you've all heard it. In America today, the psychological community and any of the social work community is trying to change this word trigger to activate. Okay. And the reason is because there is so much gun violence in America. The feeling is that so many people have been affected by the gun violence that using the word trigger actually re-traumatizes them, and we should use the word activate. I'm using the word trigger here because what I find is very few people understand when I say activate. I generally do use the word activate, but it's important to know what we're talking about. I don't know in Israel that this is an issue. I just wanted to make you aware of it. So you can choose the words that you want. Most people understand when you say, oh, that triggered me, as opposed to, oh, that activated me. Okay, so let's first talk about what it is. It's a stimulus that elicits a reaction. Okay, that's a trigger, but it's an emotional trigger. People who have grief, old grief, people who have gone through that huge shift and are back to their new normal and are functioning, generally have a good clue as to what their triggers are. Generally, not always. Or they can recognize what triggered them. For instance, a woman who unfortunately had a stillbirth at 38 weeks, 3 years afterwards goes to a Brit and looks at the baby, and for some reason, whether it's the same outfit that she bought for her baby that she thought would live, and she just loses it. Okay. So it's that outfit that triggered her, that got her, that stimulated that emotional response back to her stillbirth, because grief never leaves us. It never leaves us. This trigger could stay with her the rest of her life. She recognizes it. She allows it because she can't stop it. And then she knows she's going to go back to being herself again. And she allows herself to have that emotional response. Okay. There are some triggers that people can avoid. For instance, there's some people that, something happened to them as a child in the dark, and they can't be in the dark. So they always have a flashlight with them so that they can avoid that trigger. So those are triggers that are very manageable, controllable, and understandable. We go back to my woman from the South. When she walked into the hospital while she was having contractions, and I'll use the word fell apart, or she became very emotional, the hospital triggered her. You had no clue that was going to happen. She had no clue that was going to happen. This is a whole new world for her. Dealing with this new grief, we don't know what's going to trigger. We don't know what's going to be the stimulus that's going to remind her mind and body of what's going on. So we can't prevent it. Obviously, you can't prevent taking her to the hospital either, and you can't anticipate it. The only thing you can do is be aware of it. And when it happens, be supportive. I know it's hard. I'm sorry. You haven't been, if she can verbalize, oh my God, I've never been here. I don't know what it's okay. Would you like to walk around? I could show you the hospital now really quickly. I'm sure that it would be okay with them. We'll go through, we'll take a look, if she's in a place to that, because for some people, she needs the control of knowing at least where she is, and that makes her feel good. But if you notice, one of the things that I'm always doing, or I hope I'm always doing, is I'm asking, is it okay if? Would you like to? Because this again allows her the control. She's not the victim where, oh, I'm going to show you the hospital so you feel better. When I say that, who's got the power? Me. When I say, can I show you? Would you like to? She's got the power. And we always want to make sure that we give her the power. We want to make sure that she feels safe, that you're by her side, but she's in control. Really helpful for the mom. Really, really helpful. So this is not new information. You all know this, that the past can trigger the present and future births. So what she's going through now, going to this hospital by herself or with her husband, a strange place, triggering October, what she lost, what she left on October 7th. That is the now. It's very possible when she has baby number 8 and number 9, even if she's back in the South, she could be triggered again. This could be a trigger. So what does that mean for all of you? Same thing. Just like you never know if the woman doesn't share with you, and sometimes women don't share because they have denied it themselves. And it only comes up because the body opens it up during birth. Okay, so what does that mean? That means whatever happened, whether it be sexual abuse, which is huge, and most women, some women still do deny it, whether it be a doctor and the way she was treated by a doctor or a health professional that demeaned her to the point that it really made her feel bad. And then she just said, oh, it's nothing, because we invalidate ourselves. And then she gets triggered when she's in the hospital, when the doctor walks in, and maybe he used a phrase similar to the one that really hurt her. And then there she is again, spiraling. So we can't anticipate this is going to happen, especially when the woman is in denial, but we need to be aware of it. And then we pull out our bag of tricks again, not saying, oh, he didn't mean that. He didn't say anything bad to you. Because then again, what does that mean? You're invalidating her. Oh, I'm sorry. It sounds like that really bothered you. I'm sorry what he said. You know, did you understand? Is there something I can do now? Validate, validate her feeling, validate. She might not even find it. Validate it. Be prepared for it. Stay by her side. That's the best you can do. Okay. Important. Grief is love. You don't grieve what you don't love. Everything we've talked about is about love. And that does make it feel a bit better. A person who loses their job and hated their job, not going to grieve his job. Okay. Our example was a man who loved his job, who felt fulfilled, who just, it was who he was, that he grieves. A job he doesn't like? Nope. When my dog died, my husband couldn't stand my dog. Trust me, he didn't grieve my dog's death. I did. Okay. So grief is very, very individual. It has to be what speaks to you, what you love, not what somebody else's love. And that goes back to why we don't judge. Because what I love, you don't love. I love my dog. My husband didn't love my dog. So again, understand that you can't assume anything. That's the most important piece. You can't assume because you don't know what that person's story is. Okay, not all grief has trauma, but all trauma has grief. Okay, think about that. Not all grief has trauma. So let's unpack that one. Your 95-year-old grandfather died, lived a beautiful life. Thank God didn't suffer, left a beautiful legacy. That's grief. And you're allowed to grieve. I remember when my father passed away, he lived to be very old. And I told my children, I said, you know what, guys, this is really sad for us. We're very sad as a family. Everybody else looks at it and says, thank God he lived a very long life. And that's true. Both statements are true. We as a family can grieve, and he lived a beautiful life. But there's no trauma. We weren't traumatized by his death. It was expected. However, this same grandfather passes away at 95, and his son is fine. He understands. He feels shalom. His father had a beautiful life, a beautiful legacy. It's all good. Son number 2 is devastated. He's traumatized. He lost his father, and he never was able to show his father his love. He was never able to show his father his family because he never got married. He never found the time. He was never successful. There were so many. So in the same family, there can be a loss, the same loss, but 2 different people can have different reactions to the loss. One has grief and one has grief and trauma. Same thing. You can have a woman giving birth and her sisters there helping her. And, you know, the sister does not have the same experience as the one giving birth. And she's not as supportive as you would like because she is not the sister. So it's really important to recognize it goes back to our story, our past, and how we are. But understand that trauma has grief. There is no trauma without grief. What happened October 7th, the fact that let's say anybody who was just moved on a dime, the army just said, let's go, we're leaving, we gotta go. That's traumatic. They either saw or heard the terrorists. They were part of it. So they're traumatized. But on top of their trauma, there's grief. There's grief of leaving their community. There's grief of leaving the security of their home. There's grief in whoever they lost. There's lots of grief there. So understand, and the difference between the two is with grief, we're very emotional. We're very emotional. With trauma, there's also fear. With trauma, there's also, I guess fear is the best word. It's a different reaction, and it needs to be treated differently. But there, you can have trauma, you can have grief without trauma, but not trauma without grief. Okay, so there's grief, as we keep talking, there's lots of different kinds of grief. This slide talks about personal grief compounded by national grief. Before, on October 6th, Jody and I were doing our stuff. October 7th, everybody's life in Israel changed. And one of the things that we changed were the services that we provided. We recognized that there was so much national grief that as a country, we were all going through a tremendous amount of grief. Okay, I wasn't in the South. I didn't live in the South at the time. I didn't have children in the army. So where was my grief? My grief was what October 7th did to all of us. And that is, number one, our lives have changed forever. We cannot count on what we counted on October 6th. October 6th, our biggest problem was, where was I going to go for Simchat Torah? What time was I gonna put my kids to bed? How much candy was I gonna let them eat? On October 7th, rockets all over the country. What's going on? Where's my security? Infiltration? They wrote police station was taken over. We lost our sense of security. We lost our sense of predictability. After Sukkot, my kids were going to school. After Simchat Torah, we were going to school on October 8th. And all of a sudden, we're not going to school. And all of a sudden, there are rockets every day. And all of a sudden, are there going to be infiltrators in my community? Is that possible? And I suspect, I can't see everybody's face, but if I would ask you to be very, very honest and raise your hand, I suspect that most of us would raise our hand and say, in the middle of the night, I kind of did have that moment when I thought, okay, is somebody going to come into my community? Am I really safe? And whoever thought like that before October 7th? So we lost so much. We started to learn a new way, and that is plan A and plan B. Plan A, I have to go to the grocery store, I have to go to the pharmacy, and I have to drop something off at my mother's house. Okay, so normally October 6th and before, I would just go do all my errands. From October 7th on, it was like, okay, I'm going to go to the grocery store, but the grocery store is in the mall in the bottom. So I know that there is a Merchav Mugan there, and I know where it is. So if there's an azakah, I can do that. That's not a problem. To drive from the grocery store to the pharmacy, oh, I don't have to. There's a pharmacy in the mall. I can just go upstairs. If there's an azakah, I know where that Merchav Mugan is. But I have to drive to my mom. Okay, so if there's an azakah, I'm going to get out of my car. Plan A, plan B. And to this day, well, at least probably until a month ago, I think most people on some level had a plan A and plan B. I think now we've gotten used to our new normal, which is it's in the back of our head. Like we could have an azakah. It won't be so totally, and we'll be okay. That is our new normal. That is what national grief has done. National grief has changed our lives. national grief has made us think in a very different way, has made us function in a very different way. Outside at the park with the kids, you tell the kids, okay, if there's an azakah, this is what we're going to do. You pre-plan, you prepare, because October 6th and before, we never had to do that. So that's national grief. What we didn't add here is communal grief. And communal grief is when somebody in your community dies, severely injured, displaced. And that also is part of our fabric of our society now. And we understand it and we respect it. So how does that impact what we call personal grief? Because what we've been talking about is personal grief. Even our woman from the South, she had personal grief, which she denied because she focused on national grief. She took care of everybody around her. And that's really what happened from October 7th on. I was seeing many women, had a lot of phone calls about loss, and you know what happened? It all stopped. It was really not so surprising, but to the extent that it stopped was surprising. And then I find out from Jody that SidebySide offers a Hebrew support group for women who've had stillbirths. And they stopped it for about 3 months. And when they went back to trying to organize the new group, because unfortunately they were still having stillbirths over this time period, and women were still having miscarriages, and there was still, early infant death. That was continuing. But what wasn't continuing was the women giving themselves the space and giving themselves the legitimacy to say, this is terrible. I lost something. I'm grieving. And when SidebySide reached out to the women who had the stillbirths, they didn't want to come. They didn't want to come. And then there's an organization in Israel. It started in New York, and they have a branch in Israel called Knafaim. And they are a very yeshivish religious group of women who support women who also go through stillbirth. And I was speaking with them, and they told me the same thing, that they had no phone calls during this time period, that people put aside their personal grief because they felt like national grief was so overwhelming and was so much bigger than them. How can I grieve the loss of my baby when the whole country is in turmoil, when soldiers are dying, when 1,100, 1,200 Israelis were murdered in one day? How can I complain about the loss of my baby? That was how powerful the national grief was and is. Hasn't changed that much. Now we're working very hard at helping everybody understand that we make space for everything. But that's the piece that you also have to remember while you're with a woman. If she is experiencing personal grief, she's also experiencing national grief. And she's not the only one experiencing national grief. You're going into a hospital setting where you have a lot of people working there. You have midwives, you have doctors, you have residents, and you don't know their stories. You don't know. Now, technically, hopefully, they're able to put it aside so that they can take care of your woman, that they can take care of the mom as best they can. But we're human. And it's really important to understand that our story goes with us. So it's important that it's okay when you have a midwife, that if it's calm in the room and everybody's okay, it's okay to check in with her. How are you doing? It's okay to say, do you have anybody in the army? It's okay. It's okay because we are Am Echad and we're all going through. So it's okay to also set that up, that you're part of the team with the hospital staff. And by asking that question, how are you doing? Do you have anybody in the army? How's your family? You're setting up teamwork with the midwife, and you're recognizing that she too has a story, and she too might be coming into this with a little angst, a little stress. We all are coming in with that. But asking the questions, if there's space and if it's, is a really important thing. And it's again, it's validating and it's showing up. And hopefully she'll ask the same questions back. And we're going to talk about how to present the woman to the midwives, that Jody's going to tell you all about the best way to do that. So it's really important to understand that even if you feel like you personally don't have personal grief, you have definitely been affected by national grief. And that goes with you as well. Okay. Are there any questions up till now? Let's see if we need to take a breather here. You good? Okay, excellent. Okay, so now we're going to go on to general grief again. There are, excuse me, there are stages of grief. Kubler-Ross is the Bucky on grief. She's the one that really brought grief into the forefront. And David Kessler, whose name isn't here, is learned under Kubler-Ross, and now she's no longer with us. She died. David Kessler has now taken up the mantle of grief, and he is the one, if you ever want to read any books, I would recommend his books. I actually studied under David Kessler, and he really just continued on from Kubler-Ross. When you look for these stages of grief, you're going to see very similar, but there's no one set wordage for the stages of grief, but it's the whole idea. And the first stage, which is what we talked about, was that numbness, that, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. That I can't move, I can't function, I can't. And that stays with you for a while meaning up to 2-3 months. And I generally don't, it's very interesting. I'll just tell you on a sidebar that I get women that call me immediately after loss because they are in such pain and such panic. They don't follow through. They don't have the capacity to follow through, to come, to talk. It takes a couple months until they're able to process themselves to a point where that shift, where their brain is now no longer in shock and no longer in denial, which is our second stage, where they're able to then start working on bringing out the emotions. And that's where we need to be. So that first, shock and denial, they're right up there. And then comes anger.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you find that there's more of grief process, or more when something is sudden, like your dog is not well and going to die in a month and there's nothing they can do? So is that more, do you find this, or in birth, should really relate it to birth? Do you find there's a greater amount of people who can't deal with it or in shock and go through all this when they don't know it's coming, and suddenly someone was killed in a car accident, or suddenly in the 9th month and there's no heartbeat?
Yes and no.
Okay.
In general, the idea is, are you guys hearing me double?
Oh, maybe I'll shut off.
Okay, thank you. The shock is shock, because even if it's coming, generally what we hear is, okay, I'm still hearing an echo. Are you off, Sarah? Did you mute yourself? Why am I hearing an echo? Do you hear it? Okay. So generally what happens is, you don't hear me in double? Okay, great. So generally what happens is a lot of it has to do with the past. For some people who are ready for the death because they've started the mourning process early, it does help. Certainly when something comes out of nowhere, it usually takes much longer for the denial to go away, to reduce the denial, because you didn't expect it, as opposed to something that you've expected. Does it lessen the grief? No. Does it lessen the reaction to the grief? It can. Did that answer? Okay. Okay, I didn't hear you. I saw your lips moving, but I didn't hear what you said, so I wasn't sure.
I stayed on mute, so
Oh,
now
it's okay.
it makes
So,
sense. Yeah, I can, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and for some people, if you have somebody who is going through, God forbid, cancer or Alzheimer's, you actually start saying that goodbye process much earlier than somebody, and you have that goodbye to give and say. So your grieving starts earlier. So your process could seem shorter, but it was the same process. It just started earlier. Okay. So then we get to anger. Okay. So anger is also a very common response, but what I would have liked to do is put a slash by anger and say fear. That a lot of times people are angry, but they're actually scared. They're scared of a future without the job, the parent, the child, whatever it is, with the dog, whatever it is you lost, that anger, it manifests as anger, but if you have to understand it as fear. Fear of how am I going to manage? What am I going to do? How am I ever going to go back to living in my house in the South? There's a lot of fear. And when you're helping a woman birth, how am I going to take care of a newborn in a hotel full of people? I'm going to wake everybody up. The baby's crying too much. How am I going to breastfeed? I have no privacy. Some of that fear could come out as anger. And some of that all relates to grief. It might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to her. Okay, then there's bargaining. Bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. Okay, depression is also something that we are concerned with. And now let's also remember the women that we're dealing with are very hormonal. That adds a whole nother level of concern, or a whole nother level for them to understand. And how you can help them with that is to remind them of that, and to remind them, you know what, you're going through a lot. You have a lot on your plate. Your plate is so full. And on top of it, lucky you hit the trifecta, your hormones are going to add. So we can't take anything off your plate. I'm really sorry. That's what your plate is, but understand that it's even got that extra sauce on it because of your hormones. And just again, we go back to the idea that knowledge is power. Let them have the power of understanding. Let them have the power of knowing that you are going through a difficult time and your hormones are also going to be in play here. Much worse after you give birth. A lot of times what I like visualizations. I think that sometimes we talk a lot and not everybody is so auditory. And I think that if we help with visualizations, and one of the things I tell women is, the snow globes, remember those snow globes? Right now your brain is like a snow globe, and your hormones just take that snow globe and it's like shaking, and it just can't calm. So it's really, really important that you understand that and watch it. Close your eyes and watch it, and just let it calm as you watch it. Let that snow stop shaking the globe and let that snow come down a little bit. And sometimes that helps them gain a little control over what's happening. Another technique that I use a lot that I really like is I simplify what goes on. And I explain to women, you have two sides to your brain. You have an emotional side and you have a cognitive side, a side that thinks, a side that is based on evidence. When the two of them work together, we're in sync. It works. A pregnant woman without anything else going on is going to, because of her hormones, have that emotional brain start taking over a little bit, because that emotional brain, when it's fueled with fear, anxiety, angst, it just keeps growing and it gets bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden it's taking, like, okay, I'm pregnant. Oh, I felt that. Did you feel that? Oh my God, what do you think is happening? Oh, maybe the baby it's turning. No, the baby's not doing well. Oh, did I feel it move? I don't remember. Did I feel it move 5 minutes ago? Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I wonder if the baby's moving. And all of a sudden you start getting all this stuff and one piles up on the next. It's like the tall tale, saga. It just keeps going, going, going. And I tell women, when you're in this mode where your emotional brain is just having too much fun and your cognitive brain, your evidence brain has no voice, I want you to start remembering what a 2-year-old does when it's having a tantrum. What does it do? He gets on the floor and he just tantrums. And what does mom do when that happens? What is the most effective thing to do with a 2-year-old when they're tantruming? Nothing. Let them tantrum. Bribing's not going to help. Loving is not going to help. Hugging is not going to help. Yelling is not going to help. The kid has to have that tantrum. And your brain, when it gets so, especially at middle of the night, that's usually when it happens, gets so nutty buddy, just say, oh, but you recognize it. My brain is having a tantrum. Wow, what a tantrum. Okay, I'm going to wait it out. And eventually your brain starts to calm. And then your evidence can kick in. And your evidence can kick in and say, wait a minute, I just felt the baby. Oh, I'm not sure. I'm going to go take something sweet. Oh, there are the kicks. I'm feeling the baby now. Okay. And as you use your evidence to help get that emotional brain back in check, you're able to get yourself back in balance. It's just a tool. You can use the snow globe in the same way. Your emotional brain is crazy, crazy, crazy. It needs to just calm down. But the way to help yourself calm is to always look at your evidence, to always see what is going on. After October 7th, Jody and I got together and we offered for 8 weeks free Zoom once a week at night, free Zoom sessions for pregnant and postpartum women. And the idea was that we knew, based on what we were hearing, that we knew it was a very unsettling time for us, and how much more so for a woman whose hormones are out of whack, a woman who's bringing new life into this world, a woman whose husband might not be at home because he's been called up. And part of what we did was we talked to them, we validated, and we reminded them that yes, your hormones are also interacting with your fears and your angst. And it's okay to recognize that. And we gave them tools to help them relax. So again, a lot of this is work on the mom's part, helping her gain control and recognize when she is a bit out of control. So getting back to these stages of grief, okay, like everything else in life, these are, approximations. And of course, we don't follow what you expect. Is you start with denial and you go through each stage until you shift into acceptance and you're back to functioning. but that's not the way it works. The reality of it is you're all over the place. And just when, a woman, a person, a man, a woman, a family in grief, just when you think, okay, they got it, you take 5 steps back and you go back again. And you go through the stages, and you don't finish a stage and you're done. The stages reemerge, they come out again, and you just kind of go with them along with the ride. And they recognize that that's just 2 steps forward, 1 step back. As long as you see a shift, a slight shift that is maintained, even though they take a couple steps back, you know that they're heading in the right direction. Okay. I want you to look at these pictures, and I want you to unmute yourself if you can tell me what you see in comparison of the 2 pictures. Mm-hmm. And Jody, you can't. No cheating. You know my stuff.
I see like a separation between the couches together before, and now there's one by itself, separated by
the
table with the flowers. Yeah.
Excellent. Anybody else?
She's sitting in the single chair maybe and blocking herself off from people who are visiting.
I think isolation.
With the flowers.
Excellent. Excellent.
I also see the flowers were rearranged. It wasn't just that the table was moved its location, but the flowers on the table were rearranged.
Excellent.
That meant something to whoever did that. There was a reason why they did that. I'm not sure, but it was meaningful to whoever did that. Even the lamp was moved. I mean, everything changed like it does when you have a situation. And every single thing about the change is very meaningful to whoever did it and whoever is sitting now on those couches and chair.
Excellent.
I see that everything in the before is like organized and straight and clean. And like after, it's a little bit more out of place, meaning some like things that were very normal or regular, and all of a sudden it's like dysregulated.
Wow, you guys are great. Got to play Where's Waldo. That's wonderful. Okay. So first, it's important to know that in general, the world is grief illiterate. Okay. We don't really understand how and what to do in grief. But there is a tribe in West Africa that when there's a loss in the community, while the family and friends are at the cemetery burying the person that was lost, the rest of the community goes into their house and rearranges the furniture. Why?
Maybe it's like in Yerushalayim, there's a custom when you finish your shiva, you pour water on the floor. You make a before and an after. So a person can step into the new reality, slowly start that path. I'm just guessing, but when you come into the house and the furniture is different, it echoes what's happened inside in your heart. Life is not the same anymore. It's changed. And it's a recognition of that when you come into your house and you see that change. And you're going to sit on the couch that person used to sit on, but he's not alive anymore. She's not alive anymore. And you're going to be going back to that same couch, that same living room, the same lamp. But things are different. And the house now, I like that, what they're doing, recognizes something has happened here. It didn't end with the funeral. Things are different, but we can still sit on the couch. We can still buy, enjoy, smell, look at flowers. And we can still rearrange the furniture again and again. But it's not exactly the same anymore. Something has happened that is different. That's my thought.
Anybody else?
I was thinking that the fact that the community members all go into their homes and rearrange is like a form of what we would say, Imo Anochi Batsara, like our lives have also changed and things look different for us as well. And we're with you in your grief.
Beautiful. You're both were right on par. That is exactly what it is. As Rena said, the changing of the furniture is to signal the new normal. And if you notice when we talked about now, yeah, post October 7th, I now call it the new normal because we're never going back to October 6th before. We're just never doing that. And that's on a national level. That's national grief. And here we're showing it on a personal level that they're coming back to their house. They're coming back to their security, but now their life is going to be different. And therefore the furniture has been changed and it is different. And also a beautiful thought is that that's part of what the community does for you. We support you, we show up for you, and even in your new normal, we're going to be there for you. So we take what they do, or what this lesson from the West African tribe, and we try and remember that that's the power of grief. That's the power of what happens when you lose, that nothing stays the same. And that's huge. So a woman who's giving birth and who's given birth before and now is doing it in grief, it's going to be a very different birth for her. It's going to be a very different experience. It's her new normal. Okay. Any questions on that? We're going to go on to a different. Okay. So let's talk about us. Let's talk about the professionals who try to support, and even the friends that try and support. We're all different. We all have different strengths. We all have different ways of approaching. We are just all different. And again, we all have our own story. So it's not just the woman who has a story. You have your story. You have your experiences. You have the way you were raised. Some people are raised very emotionally aware, very emotionally, you bring your emotions to the forefront, where others are raised that, we just, we're very quiet. We keep it inside. We don't share. We're sad, but we don't tell anybody, it's like, being strong. And it's important. And I want to put this in about resiliency versus grief, because we live in a world, our Israel, where resiliency is expected. It's we live in a tough culture. And, if there's a pigua within 12 hours, cleaned up, life is back to normal. On the one hand, I understand that needs to be for us as a society to continue to function and not let the terrorists and the terrorism affect us and win. On the other hand, where is the space for the people that were affected by that pigua? The victims, the families of the victims, the people who saw it, the people who cleaned it up. Where is the space for them when we say, all done? That's our resiliency. Resiliency is our children, our kids in Ma'on, the little young, the kids in Gan. What do? They teach them songs about going into the mamad when there's an azakah. If you think about that, that's wild. Like, we are teaching little kids, it's okay. Rockets are raining down on us, but we're going to sing, it's okay. We teach them resiliency. It's not a bad trait, but it's something we need to recognize. The problem is when resiliency becomes not allowing to grieve. When we mix up resiliency, because if you're not strong, you're not good. No. You can be resilient and grieve. You can be resilient and acknowledge you suffered a loss and allow space for that loss. And that's our job. That's our job as community members. That's our job to understand that we have to go change the furniture. that we have to allow them to grieve. Changing the furniture is the message that you can grieve and you should grieve. So we have to be the ones to allow that, not say, oh, you had a miscarriage, don't worry, you'll have more. That's not right. That's not helpful. That's not supportive. That's not validating. We have to be validating. We have to be supportive. We have to give space for grief, even while being resilient. Okay, here we go. Sympathy versus empathy. Okay, this is about us now. This is about our responses to people who need support. Okay, what is sympathy? It's understanding others' pain, is understanding other people have gone through a difficult time. Even now in America, Hallmark, they're the card people. Yeah, I used to love cards. I thought they were fantastic. And sometimes what the card actually is when I don't have the right words, you find the card and you can acknowledge. And they even have cards now for divorce. Okay. And what is the point of that? It's acknowledging that the divorce has changed. Your normal has changed. So that is a nice way of, if you don't have the words, of finding a way to acknowledge it. You have sympathy is you understand. I don't love the word sympathy as much, but the meaning is what's important, is that you understand somebody else's pain. You understand it from their perspective. You're not trying to compare. You're trying to give validation to what they are telling you. You're not trying to take it away by making them feel better. Sometimes the hardest thing, especially for close relatives, is to sit with the person while they're in pain. It's like when your little kid falls on the playground, you're going to pick them up, give them a big hug, put a Band-Aid on it, and, say, you're okay, keep going. But you try to take away the pain, which is what we do. That's how we love our children, and that's fine. But there comes a point where we can't take away the pain. And that's something that we're very bad at. It's something that we're not comfortable with. And it's being comfortable sitting with somebody else's pain, not trying to make it better, not taking it away, because you can't. And by trying, you hurt them more. You're trying to help, and you're, in the end, hurting them more. You might be making yourself feel better, but it's not about you. It's about them. Then there's empathy. Now, empathy is really important because it says you're feeling others' pain as it's your own. Okay? Let's compare the two. Sympathy is understanding their pain. Empathy is living their pain. Okay? If I feel your pain, what happens to me? If I am in as much pain as you are, what can I do for you? Where has the focus shifted? It's no longer on you, the person that's grieving the loss of a child, the loss of a parent, the loss of a job, the divorce. It shifted to me. Because do you know how I feel? Do you know what this is doing to me? Who are you helping? It takes a lot. It takes a lot of strength to sit with somebody while they're in pain. especially somebody you love. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. But that's the best you can do for them at that point. But if you are empathetic and you carry the burden, you're not taking it away from them. Nobody can take away their pain. They can't put it on you. But if you carry it like it's yours and become dysfunctional or as dysfunctional as the person in grief, what have you accomplished?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. You're right. Nothing good. So and there are people called empaths, and a person who is highly attuned to the energies and emotions of those around them can be considered an empath. Empaths are said to, now this is super important. Empaths are said to feel what others are feeling so deeply that they absorb or take on the emotions themselves, often at the expense of their own emotional well-being. Okay? What does that mean? What does that mean for us? If that's your personality, and again, this is a no judgment zone. We're not judging one better than the other. We are a product of our stories. Empaths could very well have a mother who was an empath, a father who was an empath, or just polar opposite. They didn't feel anything, and as a result, you have become an empath because you grew up in in an environment that was devoid of emotion. For whatever reason, you became an empath. It's not a path you choose, it's one you develop, and that's okay. But if you recognize this trait in yourself to the point that you really take it on, that you feel like you have to go to funerals of people you don't know because you feel like that's the supportive way, yet you come back and it's like you're sitting Shiva. What have you accomplished? No judgment, but you need to look into yourself and see how you function, or make sure that it's not all or none. Let's face it, everything's a spectrum. There could be a person that's totally like at that one end of the spectrum with the empath, that they mamash take it on and come back from a funeral and want to sit Shiva because even though they didn't know the person, but they feel like that's their role. But there are others that tend to take it on because they feel so bad for the person. If you can recognize that in yourself, and if you can change that, that's fantastic. Because once again, what's our goal? Keeping our eye on our goal, on what we're supposed to be doing here. We're helping women give birth. Healthy mommy, healthy baby, emotionally, physically. That's what we want to do in the short time span that we have. So we want to do the best that we can to create the most supportive environment that we can. Being an empath in this situation is not supportive. It takes the energy, your energy that you need to be giving to this woman, the validation, the support, the I'm here for you, and you're being drained by her pain because it's become your pain. So if that is who you are, then this is not that you shouldn't be a doula, but certainly not for a woman who's complicated with a lot of grief, a lot of trauma. Not the right place for you. Jody told me a story. Don't shoot me for taking your stories. Recently that she was, I think she was Achrai, and she had a young midwife who was birthing a woman who never was giving birth to a stillbirth. And at some point, Jody saw that this midwife wasn't functioning. Jody pulled her out of the room and said, what's going on? And she just started crying. She goes, I can't do this. I just can't do this. This is so sad. This is so hard. I can't. And, because she was young and because it's Jody's job to teach, she said, we're going to do this together. And Jody was able to teach her and to help her get through this very difficult initial stillbirth that she was birthing. This was somebody who was able to learn, and this was somebody who wasn't to the extent that she couldn't change or she couldn't learn. So again, that's the spectrum, but you have to understand. And Jody would have pulled her out if she didn't see that she was able to start following Jody's lead, although Jody did do the actual birth herself. Being an empath under these circumstances is not the best. I want to apologize for the negativity in this slide. Who should not doula a woman in grief? I really tried to come up with ways to sound a little more positive. And what I found was if I did that, it sort of diluted the intensity. And I really think it's important that we always self-evaluate before going into a situation that's going to require a great deal of strength and challenge. So you're falling apart while the woman is birthing is not going to be productive for anybody. Birthing a woman, especially a woman who recently lost a husband, who recently lost a brother, you're not just birthing a woman, you're birthing a family, because once the baby is even there, you're still going to have a family in that room in pain. Now the grief has doubled, tripled. You may have the mother of the boy who was killed holding his child. You may have the mother of the girl just falling apart, watching her daughter birth a child she's going to raise by herself. You may have a sister. You will. I can't say may. There is going to be a lot of pain and a lot of grief in the room, and joy. But you have to manage it, because while she gave birth and there's a baby, and God willing, a healthy baby, the woman still needs to birth the placenta. There still needs to be checked whether she needs any kind of stitches, anything else. She needs to be cleaned up. She needs to nurse that baby. All the while, you have to be working with, and this is Jody will talk about this, working with the midwives, working with the hospital personnel to accommodate everybody's needs in a really nice way. So your skills as a doula, your skills as a communicator, your skills as a person who understands but yet can have borders. Like, you may have to ask the family to leave. You may have to ask the midwife to ask the family to leave. But you have to be looking out even after that baby's born, and you're affected by the fact that this baby came into the world. Your eyes need to be on what's going on in that room and what the woman needs, because maybe she's overwhelmed by all the people and she needs them to be out of the room. You're there to support her. And those are the things you need to think about. How can I do this the best? Because right now it's not about me, it's about her and what she needs. And that is your mantra. So my first point is that if you're not a seasoned doula, if you don't have doula skills under your belt, and you need to think about what this means, what should I be doing now, this is probably not the best birth for you, because all of your skills need to come. All of your doula skills need to just come as though it were, second nature, because all of your skills are going to be focused on helping this woman get through this emotionally. So, and if you're not feeling secure, no judgment. And it's not a bad thing, because we're here to help. We're here to do the best job we possibly can. And you know what? It's not always the right spot. It's not always the right fit. We all meet with our women prior with pre-birth meetings, and we could be the best doulas, but if we don't click personality wise, it's not the right way. And here we're talking about not personality, but we're talking about needs of a woman in grief. The other person a doula who's recently experienced a loss, she might not be the right person. She just might not be the right person. We didn't put it here, but a woman whose son is in Gaza, she might not be the right person. You have to know yourself. No one's going to say, oh, you shouldn't do it. These are your own evaluations. These are your own way of looking inside of yourself and say, do I have the strength? Do I have the focus? Focus is really important. Is my head going to be in the game, or am I going to be worrying about my kid in Gaza? These are the questions you need to ask yourself to know if you're the right person. And again, a birth doula who is a total empath should not be doing this. And again, it's all up to you and the way you view yourself and the way you think you can help. I don't want to scare you guys off. Don't allow me to scare you off, because there is, but you need to understand it's not a seamless journey.
Can I say?
Question? Sure.
Yeah. I also, for years, I sat with ATIME. They came here and talked about us dealing with stillborn for doulas, and also Knifayim. And my mother had Alzheimer's here. And it wasn't just her, but everybody in the old age home that I was surrounded with when I went there 3 times a week. Till now, I haven't done one. A stillbirth or someone who's, whatever it is, all the things you list. It's just impossible. Emotionally,
Okay.
couldn't be there for her. It helped me when I had a surprise stillbirth when we were in labor and went in and there was no heartbeat. But so it was helpful, all the information. But yeah, you really have to be there for her.
Right.
And
there's nothing wrong. And there's and kol hakavod for saying I can't. That's just as strong as saying I can. That's the piece. Remember what our goal is. Not everybody can do everything, and that's okay. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing. Okay. So I again, Jody told me a story right now. Actually, she told me before, but she works with a midwife who 28 years ago had a stillbirth herself. And she recently, not so recently, switched to Shari Tzedek. And she told them right off the bat, she goes, I don't do stillbirths. After 28 years, she still can't. So it's okay. What's more, the most powerful, supportive thing you can do is know your limits. That is the most helpful thing for anyone, for you and the woman. Know your limits. Okay. My hand is happy. My hand is holding an emotion. Okay. Many of us think that we are people of emotions, which is good, but we carry an emotion. If I'm happy, I'm happy. If I'm sad, I'm sad. If I'm, tired, I'm tired. But the reality of it is that we don't hold one emotion. We hold many emotions at the same time. So a woman who is giving birth without her husband because he was severely injured, because he's not alive anymore, because he was killed in Gaza, she can be really sad. But you know what? She can also be happy. She's giving birth. She can feel some joy. And it's really important to validate that. Women don't know that they can feel both. And you're not betraying your husband. You're not betraying anybody. If you're happy and sad, jealous, confused, whatever you're feeling, it's all okay. And you can take the baby over and say, does he look like Yonatan? It's okay. And she could smile and say, yeah, and say, well, that's so nice. She's still sad. You're not making her not sad. She's still really sad. She knows that he's not there, but she can also feel joy. So it's really, really, really important for every woman you doula. They have multiple emotions at the same time. Acknowledge that. Validate that. that helps them understand it, because we come from, I don't know where we got this idea from, but you could only feel one thing, and you don't. You feel many, many emotions. Okay, any questions up till now? We will have a half hour at the end for questions. So if you think of something, you can certainly write it down and we'll address it. I think we'll take a 10-minute break. Go get water, do whatever you need to do. We're going to come back, and the second half is going to be different. We're going to, Jody and I are going to do 2 or 3 scenarios for pre-birth meeting. And then the second half after that, we are going to do a question and answer in terms of once you get to the hospital, how to utilize, the midwife, the staff, and what happens if. So if you have any questions that you want Jody to answer, just, jot down. Like I said, at the end, we're going to go from like 11:30 to 12:30, and from 12 to 1, we'll do questions and answers. Okay? Enjoy your break.
Okay, I hope you all had a good break. I'm going to continue. So now we're going to take what we've learned, and we're going to try and plug it in a little bit. Now, what's going to happen, and what I think we all have to remember, is we can't anticipate what's going to happen. So Jody and I are going to act out some scenarios. I'm just going to do a couple slides and then we'll do scenarios. But remember, the scenarios are just snippets, because we can't predict who, what, where, and everybody's individual story. So we're just trying to plug in a little bit what we talked about, and you can see how it works. So, okay, hello. Why are you not moving? Pre-birth meeting. One second. Until now we were doing so well. Jody, why is this? Can I help you with? My slideshow's not working now. But let me and hit.
Do you want to go out and reload the slideshow?
Maybe I'll do that. Okay,
Do
one
that.
second. I'm going to stop
Okay.
sharing, and then we're going to share one more time and see if that works. Okay.
Do you want to go out of the Zoom completely? And
No.
go?
Okay. So
Okay.
I'll just talk about it. So I had a couple of slides that I was going to talk about before the pre-birth meeting, but we've all discussed it. One of the things really important. Here we go. Thank you. Jody fixed it. Okay. So this is the really important slide, because I think we all feel this way. We're scared. What if I say the wrong thing? What do I do? How do I know what the wrong thing is, and how do I know what the right thing is? And I got to tell you a little secret. You don't. And if you have ever been with anybody who's been in the depths of grief, what you say in 1 hour could be accepted and loved, and what you say the same exact thing the next hour, they could rip your head off. They could be really upset, insulted, because it's not you, it's them. It depends where their emotional brain is. Remember, we talked about that. It depends on what happened within that hour. There's so much that it depends. So you have to recognize that as much as we want to feel powerful, as long as we're not saying anything other than validating statements, supportive statements, there's very little we can say that's wrong. There's plenty of times that we say the right thing and the person doesn't want to hear it or can't accept it. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you leave. You stay. You show up and you let it go. It's not about you. It's much, much, much worse to get insulted, to leave, or not to talk. If you remember, always ask permission. Is it okay if? Can I? You will be fine. And your ego gets left at the door. It's not about you. As I said throughout, keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on your primary job. You are supporting the woman through her birth. You're not taking away her pain. You can't. You're not changing what happened to her. You can't. The only thing you can do is the best that you can in the moments that you're with her. If you remember to validate, to show up, and to be there, you are doing great. No fixing her. Can't take away her pain. You can be with her in her pain. You can sit and hold her hand, stroke her hand, massage. You can do all that, but you can't fix her and you can't take away her pain. This is extremely important, and Jody and I will demonstrate that, but you need to follow her lead. Where she goes, you go. And I'm mostly speaking on an emotional level. If she comes in and she is not at all emotional, be businesslike, be what she is. If she comes in very emotional, you're not crying with her, but you are being gentle, nurturing, supportive, and you're validating. It's okay. I get it. We're here. We're going to do this together. We are here together. Let her show you what that's on the emotion, even on a communicative level. If she comes in and she doesn't tell you that she lost her husband and she doesn't want to have that conversation, don't have it. It's not for you to pry. When you're doing your pre-birth meeting, you obviously need information. Who's going to be her person? That you need to know. Who does she want in the room? And you may want to help direct her when she says, oh, I don't care. Everyone can be in the room the whole time. And you're like, no way. You know that that's not a recipe for success. Those are conversations you can have with her, but have them as she is in a very clinical, understanding way, as opposed to, oh, honey, I understand. I know your mother-in-law really wants to be there. I get it. I get it. If she's crying, she's emotional, that's a good tone to use. If she's, I don't care, everyone can come, I just don't care, you can say, well, you know, I hear you, I get that, but let's go through who's everybody and let's figure out what role they play. And might it be better that they come in right after the baby's born? Give her some ideas, give her some selection, give her some, give her some direction, because sometimes your thinking brain doesn't work. And just the thought of giving birth without her husband, or just the thought of giving birth without her community, might be so overwhelming that she just gives up. And you, as the birth doula, you know what happens in the room after that baby's born. You know, on a I'll say normal in quotes birth, what it's like. And to have a tribe in there of mourners might be very complicated. So definitely mirror her, but get done the information that you need. Don't shy away from it. Don't be scared to say to her after a meeting of birth preferences and everything. Don't be scared to then say to her, now who's going to accompany you to the birth? Nobody. And Jody and I will go through that, and then afterwards we'll talk about it. But definitely don't be scared to get the information that you need, and don't be fearful or scared of talking about what is going to happen during the birth, who's going to be in the room, because you have to give her options. She's going to make the choice, but help her think. Okay, the last piece and the last slide is just best to meet a woman where she's comfortable. Like, I think in most cases we meet women in coffee shops, but if this woman knows that she's very emotional, she may not be comfortable in a coffee shop. She may actually want to come meet you someplace more private, in a park, in her home. She might not want to meet you in the home. She might be living in a hotel, you know, help her think about where she's going to be most comfortable.
Yes, now you want to do?
In the middle. And
Okay.
okay. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Here you go. So where are we? Here we. Okay.
And your earphone, right?
I,
You guys hear me also, right?
right. Okay. So Jody and I are going to do a scenario for you. This is a pre-birth meeting where we have not met, and I walk into a coffee shop because that's where my woman wanted to meet and where Jody wanted to meet. And and we're just going to kind of act it out and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So the scenario is that this is birth number 6 and her husband has been killed in Gaza. Okay. I'm meeting her for the first time. She's sitting in the coffee shop and Jody. Jody, hi. I'm Roz.
Hi.
You had called me.
Yeah, hi. You
Hi.
look like your picture.
I do. Jody, would you like to maybe see, should I see if we can get instead of being in the middle of the coffee shop, would you like me to see if we can move over to the
Oh,
end?
yeah, because I'm crying, right? It's probably embarrassing for you.
You, from my perspective, you cry all you want, but I'm not sure if you would like a little more privacy.
Yeah, okay.
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 Okay. Okay. Oh, good. He said we can move. Let's go over there. So we
Okay.
move. Okay. Here, I have some Kleenex, Jody.
Oh, thanks. I
Okay.
usually carry around. I finished them yesterday.
I always carry Kleenex with me, by the way, so this way I can give them to the woman. I just can't go get them now, but okay. So Jody, tell me a little bit about, what was the name of your husband?
Well, you probably know it was in the papers. He was like a really, he was really brave. So you probably know all the details, but his name was David.
Would you like to tell me a little bit about David?
Sure. He was the best Abba and the best husband, and we had a really good life.
I'm so sorry, Jody. I'm sure this is really, really difficult.
Yeah. I didn't want him to go to Miluim. He volunteered. He didn't have to go. But his unit was going, and he's already older. But he said, "There's no way they're going without me."
Well, I have to say thank you. Thank you to David and thank you to you for his brave service and for helping make this country safe for all of us. And I am really very, very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Tell me about your kids.
I have 5 kids. This will be the 6th. 3 girls, 2 boys. This one, I don't know. We never found out. That was always, we waited for the surprise, but maybe I'm going to find out this time because I don't know, maybe it's too much. I don't know. What do you think? You tell me what to do.
Well, I can't tell you what to do, but why don't we talk about tell me how you feel about finding out. How does that feel to you?
Well, if it's a boy, then obviously we're going to name him after my husband. And I feel like I should be prepared for something like that. Like, I don't like the idea of.
Okay, take a breath. Take a breath.
Of being surprised. Like, that's too much. And his mom is going to be there and my mom's going to be there. And then we're all going to find out at the same time. And that just seems really a lot. But then on the other end, if it's a girl, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, what's the downside of finding out early?
We never did that. We always waited to find out together. And now, And I don't want to change everything that we always did.
I hear that. I understand that.
And I feel like I have to ask him.
Did you?
No. No, because I didn't, you don't really think you'll ever be in this position.
I mean, did you ask them now? Sometimes the heart is able to tell you what,
No, I didn't.
okay,
I didn't think of that.
okay. So you have another 2 months until you're ready to give birth. And this sounds like a huge decision. And I suggest that you think about it a little bit. And what I like to do sometimes is wear it. Like, how am I going to feel if I do this? And how am I going to feel if I do that? And maybe if you think about it in those terms, you'll come up with what feels best for you.
Well, that's a good suggestion.
Because at the
You're smart.
in the end of the day, it's about what's good for you. So tell me about your other births.
Well, I have really, really quick births. Like I come, I have a few contractions, I have a baby. They're really uneventful.
Have you used a doula before?
No, David always came with me. Also, like there was never time to call a doula or they're really quick. So I never felt I needed it and everything was really uneventful and but when
Wait, at this point, I would then start talking to her about her birth, like get into specifics, what her birth preferences are, what she anticipates. I would do the doula work. And now we've done all that. We've mapped out a birth preference plan, and I still haven't gotten, now we're going to go into the harder discussions. Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we have a plan. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm sorry if this is going to be difficult for you, but have you thought about who is going to be your point person at the hospital? Who's going to be your David, so to speak?
well, that's why you're coming, no?
So I'm coming as a doula, and I want to make sure you understand my role. And my role is going to be to support you through the birth, but there's going to be the midwife and possibly a doctor. And it's very helpful when there's a member of the family that can be the one that does the speaking with the doctor and the midwife, because in my role, I'm not the medical professional and I'm not your mom or your sister. And it usually is a good idea to have that David person there to be able to ask questions. And we want to make this a very comfortable, a very team effort. And I don't want to step on toes as the doula. So plus, I'm just meeting you. You have family members that love you, and there must be somebody who gives you a wonderful sense of security that you would like to have with you. And it doesn't have to be a family member, it could be a close friend. Is there somebody you feel comfortable with that you would like to be there with you and me?
It's a good point. I did think of it. I kind of just thought you were coming and then nobody else has to come because we never brought multiple people. I never liked the idea of having my mom come. It doesn't work for me. I have to think about it. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay, no pressure. Just think about it. Talk to yourself and talk to, a couple friends that you might be able to find somebody. And
Friends is a good idea. Because my mom, she's not helpful she makes me very stressed and I don't want to be stressed. And his mom, she would come if I asked her to, but it's like
I understand. So speaking about the moms, tell me, have you thought about where are they going to be? Are they going to be at the hospital? Are they only going to come later? Have you mapped out what that looks like?
I want them to be with my kids at home because it's 5 kids, it's a lot of kids, and kids are having a hard time, so it's too much for one grandparent to be, and like, let's say it's in the middle of the night, or, I still have a 2-year-old who wakes up, and then the person who wakes up with them will be tired. So I asked both of them to kind of
Okay.
be there together so that all the kids' needs could be met, and then after they could come. There's no rush. Like, I know they all want to. It's
Great, great. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna end today, but I'm going to be in touch with you, and first of all, call me at any point with any questions that you may have, but I think that you and I should probably have, depending on your timing, if that worked for you, either a phone meeting or another in-person meeting, so we can then, really figure out who is going to be that person that comes with you, and to figure out what you're doing about finding out the gender of the baby. I don't want you to lose that as well. I want you to be as comfortable as possible in your knowledge.
okay. Okay. Can you maybe send me like a list of things that I should, the things that you just said, so that, because I'm like forgetting stuff
Of
these
course.
days.
Of course, no problem. And I wanted to ask you another question. Where, I know that you've given birth in the South, that you've never given birth in Jerusalem. Have you looked at the hospital? Have you toured the hospital?
I didn't even think about that.
That might be a very good idea to do as well, is try and arrange a tour, so that you are comfortable, you have an idea of where we're going, what we're doing, and at least you'll have a visual.
So which is better?
So if you haven't chosen,
Mhm.
then I suggest you tour them all, because it's like a wedding dress. It speaks to you. Many, many women will say, I'm going to this one. It just spoke to me. And if you don't find one that speaks to you, then find one that works for you, that's closest to where you are. There are many factors that go into choosing. And if you want to talk it over with me after you see them, give me a call.
Thank
Okay.
you very much. This
Honey,
was really
it was
helpful.
really very nice meeting you, and Hashem Yishmor, and you and your children should just have a good life.
Thank you.
Okay, that was one. Okay. No, we met at a coffee shop. That was her choice. Sarah just asked me that I didn't meet at her house.
No,
and
I
that was-
mean, before the birth, you were talking as it comes closer, you want to have another phone conversation with her, or maybe
gave
another
her-
meeting.
I gave her an option depending on her time frames. She has 5 children at home by herself. So I didn't know what's going to work for her. She might want to get out of the house. It might be a good excuse to get a babysitter or to get a mother or mother-in-law to watch the kids, or it might be too overwhelming at that point for her. So therefore I gave her the choice that, we'll be in touch, and you'll let me know if you want to meet in person or if you want to have a phone meeting.
No, I mean, when she goes into labor.
Oh, when she goes into labor, am I
I didn't-
going to her house?
Yeah.
Oh, that was the question.
Yes.
I want her to have somebody with her. First of all, she told me right off the bat, she goes, quick. So she I would meet at the hospital. The next scenario we're going to do is going to be a woman, her first baby. So that's a whole different story. This was her 6th, and this is a woman who says, I'm always giving birth very quickly. So there was no talk about meeting at the house.
And I noticed you were touching her. That was
was
obviously on purpose.
Definitely on purpose. She was very emotional, and she didn't draw back. Okay. If I would do this and she would draw back, then I would know that that's not, I asked her in the beginning, I did something I shouldn't have done. I said, tell me about, and what I should have said was, do you mind telling me about? I want to always ask permission. That's the piece that it's hard to remember. You see, even I forgot at first. I said, tell me his name. I said, would you mind telling me his name? Now, if she would have said to me, I really don't want to talk about it, conversation is done. I didn't need to know anything about him, but because she was so emotional, the feeling was that she wanted to share it. So when you asked that first question, you know, do you mind telling me his name? Then I said, would you like to tell me about him? Even when she said, oh, it's all in the paper, it didn't make a difference. It was all in the paper. I still wanted to give her the opportunity to tell me that. Then we develop a bond because she's trusting me to share her most intimate information. I have told her, okay, I've read about it, but I want to hear from you. I want you to tell me. I want to be part of you. So there was a lot of conversation that wasn't really happening, but it was making her comfortable. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to shy away from being scared of tears. It's okay if she cries. It's okay if we ask her the tough questions. She's going to hurt whether she talks to me about David or not. And if she wants to talk to me about it, if she wants to share it, it just strengthens our bond.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
I understand that you gave her the opportunity to like make the decisions on her own. Like there were a few things that she asked you, what do you want? What do you think? What do you want me to do? And I understand that that's not our role to like make the decision for them. But in this case, it looked like she almost never, like I feel like she needed more guidance, meaning doesn't sound like she counts on her mother and mother-in-law besides helping with the other kids, but these kind of personal decisions, you know, you said you have a good friend and she was like, oh, that's a good idea. But I felt like a little bit of like my personality would be like, oh my gosh, I want to help her more. I want to give her some guidance. So what is your take on that?
So the answer is, because it's our scenario, I took liberties and I made her 2 months out, which gave her the time to think it through. If the next month I spoke to her and found her in the same space that she wasn't able to move, then I would have gone through that exercise again. What was the exercise? What's the downside? What's the positive side? I agree. It sounds like she should. The better idea is to find out the gender, prepare herself. That's what it sounded like she really wanted. But it's very important that she come to that on her own. It's very important that she come to that on her own. So she owns it. So if it's a girl, she doesn't feel like she's betraying David, because we don't want her to do that. That's the other piece of that whole scenario, because that's what she was saying in a sense, that David and I always did it this way. And she's also not ready to give up the fact that her furniture has been moved, right? Her whole life, her new normal, but she's still going back to her old. This is what David and I did. That shift has to come from her. So as much as I would like to do it, and as much as I would like to take that burden off of her, that's what it means to sit by her side. That's what it means to let her be in pain and let her make that decision, because it's a big decision and she has to take that responsibility.
This was just a role play, and yet when you in this role play, which in many ways was very real, when you said those kinds of statements several times, she was very calm with that. She seemed very comfortable with that. She seemed to welcome your response. She wasn't insulted. She didn't behave like, you're not listening to me. I asked you, what should I do? She seemed to like that response, and it gave her the space and the time that she deserves to have. And like you said, here she has 2 months. That's a long time. Short time, long time.
But there are also women in labor, like we could remove grief from this in labor, who when they're in pain and having contractions, they want you to make decisions for them. And this, I'm speaking as like a doula for many years and a midwife for many years. It's not like I, as the midwife, can think whatever I think and think birth should look a certain way, but it's the woman's birth and the woman's birth story and birth journey. And usually the best thing that you can do is give her the space and the information and the environment to come to the decisions on her own as to what to do in terms of birth.
We're trying to empower her even when she doesn't want it, because in the end of the day, she has to own it. And that's what we're trying to help her do. It's easier to tell her, but it's more impactful and more helpful to let her make her own choices.
And when you speak to women about birth, in general, the women who feel empowered by their birth story is not necessarily that they had the best quote unquote birth or they had the best. It's because they made the choices and they were part of active members in the decision making. And I've been in births that I was like, oh, that was really like, it was hard for me to watch or be part of, but the woman walked out of that room after. She said, wow, it's such a great birth. And because she was an active person in the decision making, and that holds true.
Well, don't
all
forget,
through.
I mean, what happened to her, she lost her husband. That made her powerless. It didn't happen. She had nothing to do with it. It took away so much power from her. It took away so much from her. And what we're trying to do is remind her that she has the power. We are not going to, we are not in charge of her life. She is, even though the powers that be took away something so important to her. Okay, one more. Any other questions? Okay, one more. Different one.
Do you want to give the background before?
Okay, you go.
To give the background? Okay. So it's my first pregnancy, my first birth, and my husband was in Miluim and he was injured, and now he's in the hospital getting multiple surgeries and all different types of treatments.
Okay. Hi, Jody. I'm Roz.
Hi. Oh, I'm so happy you're here, and I'm so happy you came. I have so many questions. Hi. Hi. Okay. I really have so many questions. I'm not really sure what to do. It's my first pregnancy and my husband's not going to be with me, or maybe he's going to be with me and he's in the hospital and I don't know who's coming with me to the birth, and I don't know where I'm giving birth, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not really sure what type of birth I want. Do I want an epidural? Do I not want an epidural? Or where should I go, or what should I do? And also we might have to move because we live 3 floors up and he can't walk. And when should I move? Before the birth, after the birth? I don't know. What can you need to tell me how to do this, because you've been to a lot of births.
Okay. So first of all, Jody, I'm a doula. I'm a birth doula, and I'm here to support you. And I will answer your questions as best as I can. Do you mind telling me what's your husband's name?
Yair.
Yair. And what hospital is Yair in?
Ichilov.
Okay.
Ichilov.
And where are you planning on giving birth?
Well, I'm not sure. We live across the street from Ichilov, but I didn't really want to give birth there in the beginning because some people told me the midwives weren't so nice, but now I don't know.
What is the plan with Yair? Is he still going to be in the hospital around your due date?
Yeah, he's having multiple surgeries and they're not sure the dates of the surgeries because one surgery depends on the other surgery and it depends the rehab time. And they said that they can't really lie out for me how the surgeries are going to be. It's kind of as the days goes by, we'll know. It's like on a daily basis, but every day it's really getting better. And also what they told me, the nurses in Ichilov, they said that if I give birth in Ichilov and he is able to be moved, then he can come downstairs or upstairs to the delivery room if I want.
How does that sound to you?
It sounds like a good idea, but I'm just nervous about what other people said. I read on Facebook about the midwives, and I'm not really sure, but I also think like I don't want to go give birth in a different hospital because then for sure he can't come. So I decided that I'm going to give birth in Ichilov, and hopefully, like, the midwives, you also like if I tell them about my husband, I'm sure like they'll be nicer.
Okay. So first of all, I want to tell you something. I want to thank you and your husband for his service, because all that you guys have done has helped to ensure our safety as part of Israel, and you guys are amazing. And I'm happy to hear that he is going to be better.
Yeah, he's going to be better.
Sorry that there's a road in front of you. And I think that giving birth where he is sounds like a great idea. You'll be able
to. Have you had good births in Ichilov?
So yes. And I think that you need to remember another thing, that we as a nation are very supportive of each other. And I'm sure that when the midwives hear your story, they're going to be, as they always are, as good as possible. They're going to be even better. And I think that that needs to be a worry that you can take off your list. And I know you have a lot on your list, and I think I want to try and get through that list to make it a little bit easier for you and that you can breathe.
That's a good idea. Do you think I can maybe talk to the midwives before? Can I call
Oh,
the
you
delivery
haven't done
room?
that? It sounded to me,
No.
I think you should definitely go there and explain what's going on, ask for the midwife in charge and explain the situation. And I'm sure that they'll be able to set up something. If you'd like me to go with you, I'd be more than happy to do that. And we can set something up where we can at least, in understanding your husband's rehab schedule and your husband's surgical schedule, we don't know for sure, but we could at least try and give everyone a heads up so that everyone could be, we can make it as best as possible in the moment that it happens. That's the best that we can do, and
Okay.
that's what we'll do.
I think that's a really good idea. I know Yair really wants to be there.
That's great. That's great. Okay, good. Now,
Okay.
take a breath. I think
Okay.
it's really important. Just take a breath. You've been through a lot and you have a lot going on, but I want
Yeah.
to hear about this pregnancy. It's your first pregnancy. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? What?
Good.
Okay. Okay, so now we would go through focusing back on the pregnancy, talking about, the birth, talking about her preferences, talking about a birth preparation course, going through all our typical doula ideas. And then we're going to circle back again and go through what we went through with the other Jody in terms of who's going to go with you, who's going to be your person. Obviously, Yair even if he's there, is not going to be as able to help as before. Okay, so questions on this one? Okay, I'm going to make a comment. You'll notice that she came in and she gave me a list of all her issues. Okay, some of them were obviously not in my purview, whether she's going to move, whether she's going to, and I ignored it. I just let it go because she was, pardon the expression, she was vomiting. She was overwhelmed and she was just vomiting and she needed to get it all out. When she was finished, and I let her keep going, when she was finished, I directed the conversation to the areas of importance to me that I could help with that were in my area. She never went back to should I move? How do I move? What do I do? Because that was not the focus of our conversation. If she had done that, if she had finally said, what do I do about moving? I would have said, honey, this sounds so complicated. I think that you need to speak with your family and maybe they can better direct you because it's not my issue and it's not something I could give good advice about. And it's not something that I could be helpful with. But I didn't cut her off. I didn't tell her that's not what I want to talk about. That's not my issue. I let her get it out. So again, even if it takes an extra 20 minutes, you need to give them the space to kind of get it all out of their system. And then you can then direct the conversation to the areas of your expertise and of what you're trying to accomplish and the information that you need to have. Okay. Again, mirroring. She was quite hysterical. And the first thing I muttered, not really, I said, take a breath. Take a breath. Gave her the space, but then I became very calm because I wanted her to become very calm. I didn't say, oh my God, that's terrible. That's awful. Oh, wow. I don't know how you can manage all that. That's amazing. You're terrific. I stayed very calm in my responses because I wanted her to calm down. Just like when you have a woman who's hysterical in labor, what do? You stay very calm. You say, look at me. You try and get them to mirror you. And that's what I was trying to do with her.
Would you ask her to have a cup of tea? She's in her home. I'm assuming she's in her home.
Did I ask for a cup of tea?
No, you didn't, but would that be appropriate? Like, and then you could both have a cup of tea and then she could
at the moment when she needed to get it out.
No,
Like
not at that moment, no.
Yeah. But definitely, you know, afterwards, you can say, you know what, maybe let's have a cup of tea. We can sit and talk about it. I'd love to hear about your husband. I'd love to hear about, you know, this. And again, I directed her, like, let's talk about this pregnancy. It's very exciting. It's your first baby. Like, we want to get her back to a space where she can enjoy, because she should enjoy the fact that she's having a first baby. And we want to help her get there as well, while getting the information that we need. Okay, great. All right, so because of time, we're going to skip the third, and we're going to go on now to, we are getting to the hospital. And in this format, I'm going to ask Jody questions. And at some point, if you guys want to ask questions, just, you know, raise your hand and we'll answer them. So we are now at the hospital. Our woman has called. She is having contractions, and we are going into Kabbalah. All right, Jody. I have a woman whose husband was killed in Gaza, and she is American. She speaks the beautiful Hebrew, but she really wants an English-speaking midwife. And I know there's some great midwives, and I know that there are some midwives who are younger or less experienced or less patient, or who have their own children in Gaza. I want to make sure that she gets a really good midwife. How do I do that?
It's a really good question. First of all, it's unfortunately, as the midwife, we don't have the opportunity to get to know the woman before, which is a really, really hard place to start at as a midwife. What you can do, which we're working on, by the way, but that's a whole different story. We are working on that. I hope the next time we speak, I have different information for you. But it's a really, really hard thing. And sometimes the Kabbalah, depending on the hospital you're in, could be really busy also. The midwives have the same goal as you do, that the woman is supported, that she has a good birth, that she has everything that she needs. So the best thing you could do as a doula is tell the midwife, we don't know. There's no way from looking at the woman that we can know that her husband was killed, that she's here by herself, that she with Gaza, or any of that information that you have. So I always tell the doulas, tell me. Let me know. Obviously, ask the woman permission and tell her, I want to go talk to the midwives about everything you're going through, so that they could better help you, and that we can better arrange. Tell her that. And then go over to the midwife, or give the woman the opportunity and say herself, do you want to talk to the midwife, and tell her everything. Most women, it's easier if someone else advocates a little bit for them, and you go over to the midwife and say, I just want you to know.
Who in Kabbalah do I go to?
So depending on the hospital, depends on how their Kabbalah system works. But usually that first midwife that you come in contact with, the triage midwife, wherever it is, in some hospitals, the triage midwife is also the midwife who checks you, is awful. But that first midwife you see, she's the first one, because then she can speak to her achrayit mishmeret. She can speak to whoever she needs to do to get the ball rolling. And she is your first contact person, that first midwife you see. Also, if you feel, because unfortunately, I'm not telling any of you anything you don't know, there are midwives and there are midwives, just like there are doulas and there are doulas. So I cannot guarantee anything, but most midwives will react in wanting to help in this situation. But if you feel that the midwife who you tried to talk to and try to is not giving you the appropriate response, there's always an achrayit mishmeret, and you always ask, can I talk to the achrayit mishmeret? And I also always tell the woman this, and this is something really important to know. Legally, you're allowed to switch your midwife. If for whatever reason the midwife whom the woman is connected with, it's not good chemistry, you feel that she's not patient, you as the doula can't switch the midwife, but the woman could ask to speak to the achrayit mishmeret, and she will change your midwife.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we go in, we get checked. Will they accommodate her in any way because of what she's going through? In other words, if there's a list or they're very busy.
Yeah, so very, very much so. I'm part of the Irgun HaMiyaldot. I'm the representative from Shari Tzedek for the Irgun HaMiyaldot, and we've, since the beginning of the war, we've been very much involved in seeing how we can help women who have been displaced, whose husbands have been killed, whose husbands have been injured, whose husbands are not present. And it's the continuous talk among all the midwives in the hospital. Every hospital, obviously within their means, can do the accommodations that they can, but 100%. I could speak in Shari Tzedek. This has happened more times than not. It actually happened to me on Sunday evening when I was achra'it. A woman, she needed to be induced for medical reasons, and her husband only had a small window that he was able to leave Aza. So she cut the entire Shari Tzedek line, which for any of you know, it's usually a really long line to wait to be induced. She cut the line.
She cut or they put her?
I cut her line. I
Okay.
cut the line for her. She said, my husband has only this amount of time, so I don't want to call him unless I know I'm starting the induction. And instead of waiting in this, and also he had to leave Aza and they had to get in touch with him, and it wasn't a thing. So we waited till he showed up in the hospital, and then we put her in right away.
Okay. Okay. So that's a good thing
Yeah.
that we can ask for,
Yeah.
we can try and help.
If you don't ask, you don't get. But you can ask and you can be pushy. And if there's something that you think that the hospital can do, the midwife is human and maybe she didn't think of it. And you can make a suggestion also.
Okay, great. Okay, so once she gets admitted and she's in her room and she's with her midwife and she's laboring, is it common to find labor stalling for these women?
Yeah. Yes, because sometimes there's a lot of emotional things going on. Labor goes very, very common with your emotions. It goes in the exact, if a woman is relaxed and comfortable, the oxytocin flows. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And when her adrenaline is high, there's no contractions. So a lot of times the adrenaline gets high because she thinks of something, someone calls, something happens, and suddenly you'll see the labor is stalled. And hopefully the midwife and you will take a second to pause and not run to do an unnecessary intervention or something like that, and say, what's going on? What can we help you with? What do you need? And kind of always do a check-in with her emotions. Also, if you see suddenly her body language changed, she didn't even say anything, she's just something, you feel the energy is different, that would be a good opportunity as a doula to check in and see what's going on and what changed and how can we help.
Do you recommend for the doula to ask the midwife, if the midwife comes in and says, listen, we're stalled, it's been too long, do you recommend that the doula ask the midwife, can we try some other interventions before we go into the medical interventions? Do you recommend that? How do you?
100%. You lose nothing by asking. Also, this is also to know, any woman can refuse any intervention. You cannot break anyone's water, give any woman Pitocin, do any type of intervention without the woman agreeing. So depending on your comfort level with the midwife or that, the woman can also say, oh, can I have a few minutes? And also any decision for intervention can wait 5 minutes. Nothing's going to happen. So you can even just say to the woman, say to the midwife, oh, can you give us a few minutes to discuss what you just said? And then when the midwife leaves the room, you can have a more freeing discussion. Also, and this is also assuming, that it's not an emergency. There's not some sort of heart rate dropping that we have to make a decision right now. Most interventions are not urgent, are not an emergency, and don't have to happen now. It's just because of some protocol that they feel that it needs to happen. So you could always ask for 5 minutes to have a discussion.
Okay. Can you share with us some stories of having moms giving birth without their husbands, with their
Sure.
husbands?
I actually started writing down the stories so I wouldn't forget them, because I've had so many stories, but my favorite story of all of them is there was a woman, she was 21, it was her first birth, and she came in to labor, and I came into the morning shift and I got her what she was already in the delivery room, and she was 6 centimeters, and she asked for an epidural. And I did all the things to get her ready for an epidural, and then I asked her casually, "Oh, are you here by yourself?" I learned many years ago, I never asked the question of, "Is your husband here?" or "Are you married?" or because there are plenty of women who don't have husbands, who aren't married, who are same-sex moms. So I asked, "Are you here by yourself?" And she blurted out right away, "Oh, my husband's on his way." And I got from my husband's on his way, and I was like, "Where is he on his way from?" And she said, "Oh, he was in Aza, but we got in touch with him and he's on his way. Do you think he'll make it?" And then literally 5 minutes later, he bursted in through the door, filthy from head to toe. Like I have never seen like I kind of, as a mother, I just thought of my sons like being that filthy from head to toe in their madim. He had like 7 guns with him. Like it was, and he bursted in, he was like, "I'm here," like as if he had just ran a marathon. And then we did the epidural, and this woman had brought him a bag. She packed a bag for her and a bag for him. So that when he comes, of like his shampoo and clean clothing and all this stuff. So I said to him, after she got an epidural, she had fallen asleep. So I said, "Do you want to take a shower? And I brought him some towels." And then I sent the bat shirut downstairs to get him some hot food that wasn't hospital food. And he ate, and then they both fell asleep. And this was the first time they slept in the same room in 6 weeks. And I closed the door, and she was on the monitor, and everything was fine. They were both sleeping. And then for the rest of the next couple of hours, I ended up being the policewoman at the door, because the doctors kept wanting to go in to check her to see what's happening, if she's progressing. And there was all this talk: is she progressing? She's not progressing. She's been 6 centimeters for 3 hours. And I had this whole discussion with the doctors. I said, "If she's having a baby, she'll call us. I promise she'll call us. And she's having contractions and the monitor's fine. Please don't wake her up or wake him up. Just let them sleep." And as you know, as doulas, the baby did come without us checking or without, and 4 hours later, she like buzzed me that she felt a ton of pressure, and she had a beautiful birth. That's my favorite story.
Wow.
Of the thing. Yeah, but this was an incredible woman. The fact that she had the forethought to pack a bag for him, and to like, it was incredible the way she like thought about his needs, and thought that he would also have needs even while she's in labor. Like she's very special.
But that also tells us as doulas that we are not just there for the mom, because we're there for the family. So if you have that happen and you don't have a midwife that's as astute as Jody, or not as involved, then we have to pick up the slack, and we have to help her, because she was relaxed, she was okay, because she knew he was taken care of. So we're now again expanding our horizons. And as we know, even in again my normal birth, we still take care of the husbands, because some of the husbands need to be taken care of. We know that, but how much more so when they're coming in from the shetach, when they're coming from different places, or if they're injured. Like there was just, Rena just sent me the other day that article about the the man was injured in Gaza, and they were trying to take him to a hospital in the south, and they got word that his wife went into labor in Yerushalayim. And he
So they
said,
took him there.
yeah, he said, can you get me to Yerushalayim? And they took him to Yerushalayim, and there was a picture of her and him next to each other in a hospital room after she gave birth, and they were both recovering. So again, what our job is mom, healthy mommy, healthy baby, healthy family. So we have to be aware and be available to do all kinds of different things these days.
Right. Another story is from October 8th. I had a woman come from Ofakim. She was 9 months pregnant, and there was everything that happened there, and she started contractions, and they got her out and they brought her to Shari Tzedek, and she had nothing, like not even a bag, not even anything. And then and I remember her mitzpachat was filthy, and she kept like brushing it off, and and I said to her, like, do you have another mitzpachat? She's like, no, I don't have. And I had a mitzpachat in my locker, so I gave it to her to like be there, so she can at least change her mitzpachat. But sometimes it's just like a small thing, which, like, if your mitzpachat is dirty and dusty and wet, it bothers you on a regular day. And if you've gone through trauma and you've gone through this, and her, the whole time she was just thinking, well, obviously I don't have another mitzpachat because I don't even have a home. Like, it just changed her whole demeanor, that she was clean and that she was, and a lot of the hospitals we started now, we have gamachs of mitzpachot, socks. I mean, now most of the people who were the mifunim and displaced have stuff, but in the beginning they didn't have stuff. So we have like gamachs of shirts, skirts, pants, sweatshirts, all that type of stuff. So sometimes it's the smaller little thing, like a mitzpachat or something, that makes a huge difference.
So let me ask you another question. When a woman is pushing and maybe it hits her, what's really happening, and even if, your husband isn't there, he's alive, but he just doesn't make it to the birth, and she starts to really become very, very emotional, and the midwife says push, and she's crying, and what should we do as doulas? What would you want us to be doing?
You're asking me a hard question.
It's my job.
Because I don't think a midwife should ever be like yelling at a woman to push ever, whether she's emotional, not emotional. Babies come, and you can guide the pushing if necessary, but you shouldn't be yelling at her to push. Raz and I always joke that I live in like a utopia of birth in my delivery room, and most midwives don't follow the same rule book that so I can only speak for what I would do, because I'm not responsible for what happens, even though I try, but I can't, speak for everybody else. I can only take responsibility for my rooms and what happens with me. I would tell the woman, let's take a break and take a deep breath. And do you want to lie on your side? And do you want to drink something? Let's just breathe. The baby will come. The baby's not going to not come if she's not actively pushing. If the baby doesn't come because she's not actively pushing, maybe that baby's not ready to come. And you have to breathe. So I think if you're with a midwife that it doesn't really seem that that's her style, to breathe and be on your side and take a deep breath, you could make the suggestion and say, I think Jody's really, really tired. It's been a really long day for her. Maybe we can take a break for a few minutes pushing. And that's, and then usually the woman who needs the break will say, oh, yeah, I really want to do that. That sounds like a good idea.
Okay, great. Okay, one more question, and then we'll open it up to questions from everybody else. The woman has given birth now. Okay, the baby is on her belly, and there's a chabura outside of people who are very emotionally charged because this baby, either the father has passed away or he's injured or the father's not there. When they come in and you still need to clean the woman, check deliver the placenta, check, how do you want that room to look like?
As midwives, you hope and pray that we're good at reading the room. You hope, because that's 95% of the job, just reading the situation and reading the room. You can say, I mean, if she still has to deliver the placenta and you still have to check if she needs stitches, you could just very elegantly say, I'm going to ask you all to step outside for a minute so I can clean Jody up. And then once she's all clean, we'll have you guys come back in.
Okay.
And the baby's going to stay here with her mommy.
So it's better that you, the midwife, clear the room. You don't expect the doula to be doing that.
I don't expect, I think it's better if the midwife clears the room, because the doula, I always find you're like part of the family a little bit. And unfortunately, the way this country created the system of the midwife, we're kind of over there, even though it shouldn't be that way. But that it's also much easier for the midwife to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think also another thing that you could give over to the woman in a pre-birth meeting is remind her that the midwife is there for you, not for your mother, not for your mother-in-law, not for your sister. The midwife is there for you. And if there's something, you can tell her to speak to the midwife privately and say to the midwife, oh, do you think you can ask my mom to leave? Do you think you can ask my sister to leave? Do you think you could ask my mother-in-law to leave? That happens all the time. And I think women don't necessarily realize that they could ask the midwife to do that. So if you point that out to her, like, oh, if there's someone you need to leave or something is making you uncomfortable, use the midwife. Use them. They're there. And I know sometimes the midwives are busy and they're going from room to room and they're not always as available as they should be or as they want to be, because I could tell you from our side, it's really hard when you're not as available as you want to be. But if you tell the midwife, they'll help.
Great. Thank you.
Roz, the question before this one, you were referring to the midwife, what the doula should do, or with the yoledet? Because I interpret it as the yoledet, and then Jody answered in terms of the midwife. Do you remember what the question?
With the pushing?
Yeah.
With the pushing?
Oh.
It could be either one. I mean, the midwife can say, usually it's hard for the yoledet to say, oh, I need a break. I mean, I've definitely had women who say, I need a break, I need to stop, I don't want to push right now. But not all women, sometimes women feel a little threatened by the midwife and they feel that they can't necessarily say that to the midwife.
Intimidating.
What?
Very intimidating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying to change that also.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And I also so sometimes it's easier if the doula recommends like, oh, Jody's really tired. Jody, the yoledet, is really tired. Maybe we can take a break for a minute. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that there was something else involved in that question, but now I forgot what it was.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere. You know how to find me now.
I'd like to raise two things. That's okay. One is I want to thank you for really sensitive and amazing insights that are really helpful. I wondered about two things. One, if you could say a few more words about the personal public grief, and I'm coming from a personal place. One of my daughters was married to Toma Greenberg, the Maggad who was killed in Gaza, and that's a very, very personal and public mourning at the same time. Unfathomable, that so powerful both at the same time. And she did something that I think other women in her situation have also done, which is She'ifat Zera. And she doesn't know if she wants to use it. It's way too soon. But that's another dimension to all of this mourning and grieving and birthing that this forum may not be enough to talk about, but I've been thinking about that. And when she decides that she wants to go ahead and become pregnant, it's a whole other kind of pregnancy, a whole other kind of birth. And everything that you've said is very helpful and appropriate. But I just wonder if you could address that briefly, not that it's a quiet, quickie thing, but if there's anything you could say about that issue. I'm sure she's not the only one who's going to be dealing with this.
I think it goes back to, first of all, remember where she is in the process. She's still at the stage of, and again, this process of grief is super complicated because there's national grief and that's continuing. It's not that the war is continuing and they keep telling us it's going to go on for a long time. So I am 98% sure that every time she looks at a newspaper or hears a chadashot and hears that another soldier was killed, she is reactivated. She's triggered. So she's reliving this again and again and again. It's not like it was an isolated incident for her. She, on top of it, is getting more and more. She's not having, there's no place for her to calm. So I think that that's something we need to understand is happening to all the women who unfortunately are in your daughter's position. Every time there is, like just now, there's like 4 or 5 chayalim that were nifter. So I think that that's really important to understand. In terms of making a decision like that, it's early. And
Of
I think
course.
you know that and she knows that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe that it comes down to, as we talked before, about a personal choice. Everybody at some point is going to, every woman that has to make that choice is going to look inside themselves and figure out what tools are they going to use, depends on their story, whether it's the right decision for her, for her other children, and for his memory. And it's not a simple choice. It's not an easy choice, but it's still a choice, which in a way gives her power. See, she also, like, we're looking at the negative, but we also need to look at the positive of this. She still has interaction with him and she still has power with him, which still in a way is a comfort. And I know it's kind of weird, but I do believe that there is a comfort there that she has that. So the power of their couplehood was taken away when he was killed, but the power of their parenthood still has potential. And in some way, that is a comfort. What she chooses to do with it is still in her power and in her choice. And she may take years. She may need to process. She may make suddenly a decision. We don't know what she's going to do. But I think that you can look at it not just as a negative, but also as a positive in a very negative situation.
Oh, I don't see any negative actually at all. I see maybe difficulties, but I actually raised the issue before the funeral because I knew there's a window that's going to close. And I talked about it with her so she would know about it and she could make the decision. And she actually sees it as very comforting because she has an option that she may or may not decide on. And oh, it's way too soon. My goodness, she can't even talk about memorials yet. I think it could be a very beautiful thing, however she decides. Having that choice is, thank God for medical intervention. She has a choice. Right now, that's enough for her. That's all she needed right now. That is very comforting. And I think there'll be many women dealing with this issue. I'm sure she's not the only one who did that.
Right, for sure.
Rena, can you clarify something? You're saying from the time he was, before, when he killed till the burial, that window of time, they removed sperm from his body? Did I
Yes.
get it right? Wow.
It's a medical procedure that is doable. It's not always successful. And you don't know if a pregnancy will be successful, but they were able to achieve the sperm. There's a window of time that seems to be bigger than what we thought. His was done fairly quickly. He was killed one day and buried the next, and it was done. Yeah. And the army knows about it, and they sometimes raise the subject themselves with the women. Yeah, I wasn't sure if they would, so I raised it with my daughter. I wanted to be sure that she knew that she had this choice. It was up to her.
Wow.
And you gave her a lot of power. I mean, you gave her a
Yeah.
tremendous,
Yeah.
tremendous, beautiful
Yeah.
power. Thank you.
Yeah.
She has other children?
She has one other child. Yeah. Yeah, a little
I'm so
girl.
sorry
I'm
for
so
your
sorry.
loss. Thank you
Yeah,
so
really.
much.
Wow. Powerful.
Sarah, what happens is because sperm needs to be kept cold. Sperm is cold. That's why it's in the sac. So
Right.
you like the body's able to save it. They save it for an extended period of time. I don't know the amount of time that they have, but that's why it's able to be removed. Because the body gets cold when it dies.
No, my mind is just like jumping like way ahead, you
Right.
know. She
Yeah.
does it, and when she's pregnant, she should meet another guy and get married. My mind works like that, a little ADD, you know.
Doesn't matter now.
Right.
And I know.
Yeah.
Now you're dealing with now, and she has that option now to, yeah, that's wow, to let her
And that
husband
comfort. And
live
that
on.
comfort.
That's amazing.
That's what life is.
Right.
Going along with the path, then you go where it goes. She wants to keep
And
living, and
that's the
she's not going to
uncertainty.
stop because of if, that, and the other. Right now, she's
No.
mourning, she's grieving, and that's where she's at right now. Memorial later, decision about the Zera, way down the line, whatever. How will the
Wow.
daughter, I mean, any woman who becomes pregnant and already has one child, how many women stop and say, well, I already have one child. How will that child think about receiving another child in the family? Oh, I'm not going to do this. You go ahead, you do it. It's like that. Yeah, decisions. We're just going to give her the koach to be able to make the decisions and then live with them.
Thanks.
It sounds like she's so lucky to have you.
Ah,
Yeah.
whatever. She's got good support.
Wow.
Okay, any other questions about the whole presentation, grief, anything for Jody, the hospital, anything at all?
Yes, I'm gonna have another baby next year, and Jody's gonna be my midwife.
No
In fact, I'm
problem.
68. It has
No
nothing to do with
problem.
I wish.
No, the oldest woman I delivered was 58.
Wow.
So
Wow.
little 58. It was her first,
Wow.
and she had it was a trumat zera, a trumat betzit. It was complicated. It was very, very complicated. But thank God.
Wow.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. When you birth and it comes to the day that they have their stillbirth and they end up having contractions, how do you bring up that you have
You're getting cut off. We don't hear you.
Can you, yeah.
1 minute? Hello?
Hi.
I don't know. I have a very bad connection. Okay. So there's a woman that is still, and then she begins having contractions at that same week that she had the stillbirth. You see, it's really bring up
Do you want to maybe type the question in
whole-
the chat? It's hard for us
Yeah,
to hear you.
yeah,
Do you want to
yeah,
type it
maybe
in the
I'll do that.
chat?
because I see I have.
Sorry.
In the meantime, does anybody else have
Yeah,
any
yeah,
questions?
I'll do that.
Okay, you write it in the
And
chat.
then we'll
No
look.
problem.
Hi. In your first role play that you did, so it kind of reminded me of a situation where I was at a birth with a woman who her husband had left while she was pregnant and was not going to be at the birth. And this was not her first birth, but the birth was extraordinarily different than any of the births she's ever experienced, which were usually like pretty quick and flowed really nicely. And she had this, the only reason why she took someone with her was because it was the first time her partner was no longer her partner. In that role play that you did, like there was no conversation of like, well, maybe this one would be different. I mean, obviously you wouldn't say it that way, right? But is that something that you would maybe bring up with someone who typically had, really quick births, but this time maybe it would be different because she was suffering loss or grief or trauma or whatever? Or would you not want to freak her out?
I think that when you're doing one of the things what we skip because we don't have that much time, when you're going through the birth preferences and your answer, the first thing you can say is, I know you've had, earlier, you've had very quick births in the past, but if you notice, I like to use the word preference, not plan, because when we do a birth plan, it makes you feel like, well, this is what's going to happen. Whereas with a birth preference, things can always be different, but this is what I prefer. And there I would sneak in a comment like, your other births were quick and God willing, this one will be too, but we never know. The birth journey is always different. And the reason that I wouldn't do more than that, because like you said, I don't want to plant the seed. I don't want to say it, but I want to plant the seed. I want her to be prepared that it could be, maybe not. And again, part of the interesting piece is the calmer she is, the better chance she has of having that quick birth. So if I plant the seeds of doubt, I'm actually causing it to happen. So it's a very delicate, it's like threading the needle, but it's just like laying out all births.
All
birth
births are
same.
different.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're going through grief or not. You could have, I've had women, it's their 14th birth and they've had 13 births exactly the same. And then the 14th one comes and puts them through the ringer in a way that they never, ever thought it would happen. So I think it's true for all births. I think you always have to remind women that every birth is different. Every birth story is different, and every baby and mother has to go through a specific story process.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. We did not see the question in the chat.
I'm coming.
Sorry. Oh, you're
still
okay.
Okay,
Great.
okay, no problem.
Any other questions? Here it is. Okay. A woman that had a previous stillbirth and has contractions with the next baby at the same time, but these contractions are not causing change. Could it be those contractions are from the trauma? I'm not sure I'm understanding.
Are you asking, you hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you asking, she already had the stillbirth and now she's at the next pregnancy after the next birth after the stillbirth. This is the first birth since the stillbirth, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So
and she's having contractions with the new baby and she's not progressing. Is
not
that the question?
progressing. And it's at the same time as the last stillbirth. She's having those contractions at the same time. She's not
what do you
due for
mean?
another.
The same time of the
A
pregnancy,
year,
like
or
she's
the
37
the same
weeks?
time, right, at 37 weeks.
Okay. Now we get it.
She's not due for another 3 weeks.
Right. Well, it could be multiple things. First, it depends, like, what is your definition of not progressing?
Well, what?
Like
she
is the
went to
head
the
not
hospital.
coming down? What?
No, she went to the hospital. She's not even dilated.
Okay, so she's
Okay.
having contractions and and they don't want her at this point. She's only 37 weeks.
They don't.
So
they don't want her
so
to
you're asking, so she was checked and the pregnancy is doing well. The baby's doing well. Everything is doing well. Okay, thank God. And what number pregnancy is this?
This is second. The first was a stillbirth at 37 weeks.
Okay, so first of all, it's not unusual in regular births without any complications with stillbirth history for women to have Braxton Hicks contractions. This
is more than just the Braxton Hicks contractions.
Has she gotten help processing the stillbirth?
So she was with A-time and Canaphium. So they did help her process.
Okay. And at this point, is she currently getting help? Pregnancy after loss is very...
I don't know. I told her to call Nechama again. Chami again. So I don't know. I'll speak to her later on today and see what happens.
Okay,
But
I want to
she was-
just explain that pregnancy after loss is a very difficult pregnancy. And when we talk about that emotional brain takes over with every fetch, especially when you're at the point that you lost the previous baby. So
Mhm.
is it possible that she's having Braxton Hicks that are being exacerbated by her fears? Yes. Is it possible that these contractions are all in her mind? I doubt it.
No, for sure not.
Right. But it definitely could be a tremendous emotional overlay. And many women, even after a loss, we encourage to continue getting support during pregnancy because it's again the trigger. She's at that point. I want to tell you that the body knows, the body and mind are so connected that we have found that women, and I told you this, that women who have had misses and stillbirths years later, their body goes into, they get very sad because the body knows they lost. So her body could very well be saying to her, okay, this is when it happened, and she needs support in getting over this hump. So I would definitely suggest that she reach out to somebody and get some help, even if it's, as long as she keeps going to the doctors and making sure that everything is the pregnancy is safe and all is good, then she has to work on her own mind-body connection to get over this hump.
But also
Okay.
she has to rule out, like there's a lot of medical things that need to also be ruled out, like, so take it. You have to rule out, like to make sure she doesn't have a urinary tract infection, to make sure that also a lot of women who have symphysis, like the separating of the pelvic bones, when they have Braxton Hicks, it feels like real contractions, but it's not. I would, like, if the woman was my patient, I would definitely discuss the loss, but I would also send her to acupuncture to try to do relaxation and also relax the uterus. Also, I would see how the baby's lying. Like maybe the baby's not lying properly and it's putting pressure. Like there's a lot
So
going on.
yeah. So the person that's taking over in America for me, we did the BRM work, and I was doing the spinning babies work with her. Yeah. So I'm going to find out today what happened.
Right. The acupuncture also works really well because it also can be done for anxiety. So it could be like she has a lot of anxiety and that's what's causing the contractions.
Mhm.
So that would be
Good.
also.
Okay. Thank
Can
you.
can I add, because I am an acupuncturist, and and I've
You guys
actually
are
had
the
a number of
best.
no,
The best.
thank you. I've actually dealt with a lot of women in pregnancies following loss. And it's quite an interesting journey, I would say, because obviously most of them, either they've already been through some sort of processing, or I might recommend that they do that on more of like a deeper emotional, psychological level. But, you know, like you said before, like the body keeps score, and it's something that's very real. And maybe there's a bit of guilt that they feel like I should just be so excited. I shouldn't be having these contractions that aren't, you know, really doing anything for me, or I should be able to sleep because I need all my rest before baby comes. And there's like a really powerful transformation that happens when we do body work. So obviously they need to do some of the other processing, but there's processing that goes on internally or energetically or whatever you want to call it, that can be really, really beneficial. So it's something that I've witnessed, and sometimes I just sit there in awe because I'm like, this is unbelievable what's happening, but it's part of their own journey. It's going to lead them wherever they need to be led. If this client is already in the hospital, then, you know, find out if the hospital, like in the States, it's a little bit less likely, but sometimes they do allow acupuncturists in. But definitely if they've got checked out, everything looks good, they're sent home, maybe told to rest, maybe told not to rest, like find some other kind of body worker support. And I really recommend it.
Agree completely.
I have
Yeah,
a quick
absolutely.
question, if it's okay.
Yeah,
Go
for
ahead.
sure.
Firstly, thank you for this. It's been incredible. I've learned so much. So thank you for your time. My questions are, firstly, what should you do as a doula if you go into a birth with a couple and you meet a midwife who, let's say, isn't particularly welcoming towards you? What should you do about it? That's my first thing. And the second thing is, my second question is, what should a doula do if she sees that the midwife, let's say, isn't the right fit for the couple, and how can she professionally tell the couple that it's legal, that legally they can change the midwife if they're unhappy? So yeah.
Great. It's a hard question that you're asking because it's complicated, and I know it happens. I would love to be able to sit here and tell you it never happens. All the midwives welcome all the doulas with open arms and smiles. The truth is, I always, I feel sorry for the midwives who don't welcome the doulas, because the doulas are the best thing that has ever happened to the woman with the broken hospital system that we have, really. They save the birth, save the midwife, save the couple. Like, it's just a lack of understanding. And obviously it's not your job to educate the midwife, because if she wanted to be educated, she would have educated herself. If the midwife isn't working for you, but it's working for the woman, then you have to deal with your, because if it's good for the woman, it's good for the birth. Obviously, if you see that it's not working for the woman, for the couple, and you see the woman's not comfortable, that's a whole different story. And then, as you know, like, the midwives leave more often than not the room, and that would be an opportunity. And I wouldn't say to her, oh, this midwife's not good, you should switch. I would ask her, how do you feel about the midwife? Is she working for, do you like her? Is she working for you? What do you like about her? What don't you like about her? Like, kind of let it come from her. And then if she asks you, like, oh, if she says something like, oh, I'm stuck with her because she's my midwife, or something like that, you can say, I just want you to know that legally you have a right to ask for a different midwife, and this is how you do it. But you let it be her idea to switch the midwife, not your idea.
I also want to jump in and say one other thing, that sometimes the women's expectations, especially more of the Anglo, is just not what we're used to here. And what I try and do, depending on what they complain about, I try and point out that, yes, I know she's not so nurturing, but look at what she's doing for you. I had a woman who wanted to be in the tub, and this wasn't recent, this was years ago, and at Ein Kerem, and the head midwife actually took 20 minutes every hour and a half to keep the Doppler on her belly when she came out of the tub, because it wouldn't stay, and they wouldn't let her go back unless it was a clean check. But she wasn't nice. So I said, she's not nurturing. That's not in her nature, but look what she's doing for you. So sometimes we have to help the woman hear the language that the midwife is speaking, and not the literal language, but the actual, her abilities of nurturing. Her nurturing might not be, oh, honey, you're doing so well, but her nurturing might be that she's going to put you in the shower for 2 hours and not worry about a monitor. So we have to be at our best to see what's really happening and be the translators if necessary.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Then I want to thank everybody so much for attending. You showed up, and you clearly gained something from here, which makes us really, thank you. It makes us feel very special.
Thank you.
If, again, if you have any questions down the road, if you have any women that you think will benefit from our services, please don't hesitate to call. We are here. We are available. I also want to remind everybody, we would so appreciate the 50 shekel or more donation to Sarah's fund, because that fund is what helps women who can't afford doulas have doulas, and we also fundamentally
Here, I'll
believe in that.
remind you of the CDs. from
And those are the
Using Stuff.
CD
They can
and the
I can
books.
get it through email. Books all on sale now. Too.
Amazing.
And it's not just stories, a book of stories, a lot of information woven in.
For
Like
sure.
taking the water, a woman wrote me from New York and she's, wow. She said, I didn't know my doctor didn't have to break my water after 3 births. And she said, and this time I didn't let him. And it was an amazing birth. So it's that kind of information.
Terrific.
And about Abby, what Abby said, sometimes it's very humbling when the midwife does treat us like we're a speck or a fly on the wall. But as long as she's connected to the Yoletis and doing what the
It's hard.
birthing wants, I just humble myself and that's it.
Yeah,
right.
you should know we're also trying to work on that. There's a lot of things we're trying to work on in the midwifery union. I think we would all like it to be that the midwives and the doulas are a team and work together and mashlim echad tashniya and not
maybe I can give you something. I have a video, doulas making a difference, and I had it subtitled in Hebrew, and I presented it to the
Amazing.
Shaarei Tzedek midwives
Oh my
about
God.
10 years ago when they were
Yeah.
learning medicine. And so you can
Oh my,
take
please
it in.
send it to me.
Yeah.
I also would like to tell you that I keep trying to educate, because I was a doula and I'm still a doula, and I'm now a midwife. I'm really trying to, a lot of midwives don't necessarily understand what the doulas really do for the women. They don't, they just see them come and they don't know all the back work that happens before they even get to the delivery room from a doula.
I'll give you the DVD. It's by Penny Simkin. I remember when I presented it, one of the midwives says, yeah, they come in, they're here for half an hour and they get 2-3, at the time, a couple thousand shekels. And she said, and we do, yeah. So, and the other one said, well, if you want a relationship, a really deep, serious relationship with the Yoledet, because there's jealousy there sometimes, become a home birth midwife. A midwife turned to another midwife and said that. So anyway, it was interesting to see the reaction.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It was really a pleasure to meet all of you. And you could also feel free to reach out to me if you have any general midwifery questions, you need help with something. My phone number is available to you.
All right, guys. Have a good day. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so
And
much.
don't be
Thank you
strangers.
so much.
And
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you for organizing and inviting us. Really, thank you.
Okay, your pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good day,
Bye-bye.
guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.